to be friendly. Now it becomes self-conscious. Yes, okay. Okay. So we have quite a good round of papers still waiting. A lot of news to come still. So don't despair. There's still some good news to be found on the next 7 papers, I think. Yes, okay. I'm going to try and keep this open. And so we're going to start with a paper called Modeling Individual and Team Behavior through Spatial Temporal Analysis. And it's a work by Sabina Maat, Andy Bryant, Eric Kleinman, Joachim Teng, Tronwy Nguyen, Maggie, Safe, and Sas. I hope I've done that.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabir and this is Erika. We're from Northeastern University. So here we are to present our paper that's already mentioned. So let's start. So in this paper, we propose a new methodology for pair modeling and we call it interactive behavior analysis method, or in short IBA. This method facilitates knowledge discovery from game data using human experts for context-aware analysis. In this presentation, we'll first describe the methodology and then demonstrate the use of the methodology using a case study. So now we move into the details of the IBA methodology. So here you can see a diagram that shows the overall methodology of IBA. On the high-level overview, this methodology is comprised of 2 visualization systems, labeling mechanism, and some abstraction algorithms. So the first step here is to format the game data to feed into a visualization system, which is called StratMapper. So StratMapper is a visualization system and labeling mechanism for game data. At the center of the application, you can see a 2-dimensional game map. Here it is shown for Dota. You can zoom in and out. Below it is a timeline, which you can also zoom in and out, visualizing all the events in the games. A tooltip appears here with detailed information upon hovering over the game icons. The timeline allows users to select a temporal period of interest. You can move around to filter events and users on the game map and display only those that appear during those selected time period. So in summary, this visualization helps users to visualize the game as a whole and to identify their activities and strategies. So StratMapper visualization is used to label strategic complex events using the labeling mechanism. So these labels are decided by human experts. So now we come to the point how the labels are decided. So developing labels are similar to developing codes for qualitative thematic analysis. First, the members of the research team familiarize themselves with the game to be labeled. Once the researchers are familiar and comfortable with the game space, they discuss the types of strategic actions and actions taken during gameplay to identify recurring patterns and themes within the game. From there, they then identify a set of labels for decision making, strategic and tactical behaviors. So once the labels are identified, team members can individually label the game using StratMapper. So as we have already mentioned, StratMapper has a labeling mechanism. In this slide, we show a test label. So this is done by selecting a particular time period in the timeline and muting irrelevant units and events in the game, and then adding the label names and other related information. So here the test label appears, you can see. So there we show 2 other labels, that is teamfight and farm, that we have used in this research. So after the labeling is done, the label data is then processed and fed into another visualization system that is named Brief. So Brief is a visualization system that allows easy understanding as well as investigation of player strategies. So glyph is comprised of three visual representations: a state graph, a sequence graph, and a group graph. In the state graph, the states are the game states, and they are represented as nodes, and the transition as links. In the sequence graph, each node represents a full sequence of state actions for a player. You can select a node, and then you can see the sequences in the state graph and the complex sequence of states below the state graph. Similarly, upon selecting a node in the group graph, you can see the players in the group and also the team behavior in the state graph. So one thing to note here is that the distance between the sequence nodes in the sequence graph shows how similar the sequences are for the players. So this glyph is used to extract and analyze the gameplay strategies, which we will discuss later. Sometimes the resulting patterns may be incomprehensible or the labels may be incomplete, and as a result, the team may discuss their interpretations of labels and they can revise the labels accordingly. So as a result, this becomes an iterative process, and that is the main idea behind the IBA methodology. So the next phase of our presentation is actually focusing on the analysis from glyph visualization, and Erika will lead that.
So to demonstrate how IBA can be used to analyze and understand game data, we're going to go over one of the case studies we did that we talk about in the paper. We talk about two case studies in the paper, and we go into much more detail there, but unfortunately due to time, I'm just going to give like a very high-level example from one of them, which used the game Defense of the Ancients 2 or Dota 2. So just really quickly, for anyone who's not familiar with this game, you play it on this game map. You have two teams, the Radiant and the Dire, and they're trying to get to each other's base and destroy the base. There's these towers, which are represented by these triangles, that will fire at enemy players if they get too close to them. So following the IBA methodology, two researchers examined forums, tutorials, and gameplay commentary about Dota, and they developed a list of 24 labels. And that was simplified to 9 labels for the purposes of this paper, and this was that full list. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm only going to talk about 2 of these labels in this demonstration, and that is gank and push. So really quickly again, a gank is when you have 2 opponents playing against each other in a lane, and the ally or the allies of one of those opponents enters the lane from the side to flank the enemy, attack, and hopefully kill them. And then a push is when a player or a group of players really quickly move down a lane very aggressively, usually taking out towers, creeps, and any enemies they find in their way to try and make as much progress towards their goal as possible. So these labels were applied in StratMapper using what you saw, and that was done to 2 randomly selected games from a professional Dota league. The labeling process took about 10 hours, and we calculated an iterator reliability score of 0.72 with 78% agreement, and that was done using Cohen's Kappa. After the games were labeled, the player sequences were exported to Glyph, and we got this visualization, which you've already seen. So this is the labeled Dota 2 data displayed in Glyph, with each sequence in the sequence graph representing an individual player. No 2 players had the same sequence, so they each got their own node in that graph. So specifically, these are all the players based on the team and the game, with the Radiant on the left, the Dire on the right, and then Game 1 on top and Game 2 on the bottom. So one of the things you might notice is that the sequences for Game 1 are very different from each other, while the sequences for Game 2 are very similar, which you can tell from how far and close they are from each other. And this is because these games progressed really differently. So Game 2 was really back and forth. Both teams had time they spent in a winning and a losing position. So in other words, it means that the players in Game 2 both played offensively and defensively at different points in the game, regardless of which team they were on. So they have very similar sequences because they have very similar behaviors. Game 1, however, was really one-sided. The Dire team got a really early lead, and the Radiant team never caught up. And this resulted in notably different gameplay behaviors. And then you can see that here, their sequences are much more different from each other than Game 2. And this is the game we're going to look at a little bit more, but just really quickly, you might notice that some of the sequences are actually close together between the teams. And those 4 sequences that you see there are actually support players, so they're playing heroes that have supporting skills. And it was interesting to see that they played similarly, despite the fact that their teams were either winning or losing all game. So we can see these behavioral differences a bit more if we look at highlights of the individual sequences. So Batrider and Slark were the top lane heroes from the first game. And if we look at the highlighters and backriders sequence, we can see that he never transitioned to the push state, and he also never transitioned from a gank to a kill. I know there's a link there, but I assure you it's going the other way. These indicate more passive and defensive gameplay. Pushing is really risky. You put yourself way out enemy territory and open yourself up for attack. So if you're in a really disadvantageous position, you're probably not going to do it much. And similarly, if you've fallen behind, killing your opponent's probably going to be a lot more difficult. So a gank can be risky, and even if you go for it, you're probably not going to pursue it to the point of trying to kill them no matter what. So that's what we saw here. Looking at Slark's sequence, we see more offensive behavior. He has numerous transitions to the push state, and he successfully transitions from a gank to a kill. And this offensive behavior implies that Slark was in a more advantageous position that he was able to take advantage of by just continuously threatening his opponent with aggressive behavior, forcing them to stay on the defensive. So this illustrates that IBA can let us see not only the gameplay context, such as who is winning, but how the behaviors and the strategies of players in those winning and losing positions can change because of that context. So wrapping up, IBA is a new methodology that provides a generalizable context-aware means of analyzing game data. It uses two visualization systems and a human in the loop to develop labels in context through an iterative process. And this allows designers to better understand how the dynamic environment of their game influences and impacts strategic decision-making. And in turn, this could aid in catching bugs during development or even refining gameplay towards an intended design. Thank you.
Hi, Eric Arflett, Carnegie Mellon University. Super cool system. I'm wondering to what extent, like, so say I want to apply this to a new game. How much do I need to do? Or how much can I just take your system and it works? Like, do I just need that background map and all of the things go where they go? Or how committed to Dota is it right now? And how much would it need to change to afford a new game?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So the basic part you need to do is like defining the labels for your game, and then just format your game replays into the format for StratMapper. And the rest of the process are automated.
And just to add, we only showed Dota in the presentation, but in the paper we actually talk about a second case study that's on a completely different game. So it is pretty generalizable.
Hello, Johan with Tampere University. Thanks for a very good presentation and your meticulous work. I'm really interested in knowing what kinds of sort of emergent strategies you can think up from just tracking the game in terms of these different kinds of actions. Would there be sort of more latent strategic choices that could be done from the data that could be even generalized across games?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's sort of like the big question we're kind of exploring with this work. And I definitely, we've used this for 2 games, and Glyph has been used for some more, and we've definitely found that you can sort of find similar, high-level, general strategic ideas that map across different things. So yeah, that's very much kind of what we're exploring, or at least a part of it.
Hi, Eric again. I had a second question. To what extent, and this again might just be, so just a quick clarification, the StratMapper and Glyph are kind of 2 existing systems that you're pulling together in this, or is one of them new, one of that? Just a quick yes or no.
So Glyph was pre-existing, but we
Cool.
did the StratMapper.
So to what extent is this system kind of committed to fundamentally spatialized games, which space is really important in most games, but in some games you care more about a topology than you necessarily do about literal space. And so is there a potential limitation in the kinds of games this could be applied to?
Yeah, I think at present we are mostly focused on 2-dimensional games that have 2-dimensional maps. So yeah, maybe we may explore more like 3D, or if there is no map in a game, that kind of things. Yeah, that we can look for in the future.
Okay, so now we have a new paper like user, it's called user guided movement analysis in games using semantic trajectories. And Ruben Schulter, Simon Friedrichs, and Andrew Wolf.
Thank you.
And John needs to congratulate them. This honorable mention.
Thanks for coming. I'm going to present this work on behalf of Ruben, who did his thesis on the subject, but he can't be here today because of work commitments with more those duties. And so we're preparing for a talk. I had a hard time of trying to fit all of these into 10 minutes. And because of that, I thought I would try something different and rather talk about sightseeing I did in Barcelona. So I also got a nice map here, went out to my hotel and went straight to the park from Gaudi, very nice park. And then I went straight down to Sagrada Familia, which is of course must see in Barcelona. And after that, a little bit of shopping in La Rambla. Got a little bit lost around here, otherwise it was quite nice trip. And then I spent the late afternoon on the beach before I was coming back to actually quite near the conference. So you might be thinking what's all this to do with the topic of the talk? And when I explained my trip, I rather focused on the different locations I have visited and not so much on the actual routes I have taken. And indeed, in many cases, if you would like to understand movement patterns, it's not so much about the exact coordinates, but rather about the sites you have visited in a certain order. And so you can abstract from the coordinates using a sequence of sites, basically, so-called semantic trajectories. And we thought that this concept would be very valuable for analyzing player movement as well, because it doesn't matter in many cases if you move a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right. So we developed, or Ruben developed a visualization pattern for community, which basically allows to derive, analyze, and visualize such trajectories. So it basically starts with tracking the movement of the players, right? We are moving around in the environment, so we are getting the exact paths at the beginning. And then the user of the tool can basically define areas of interest, like, for example, areas where important items located, or junctions in the game environment, things like that. And based on those areas of interest, we can then derive those semantic trajectories from the actual movement data we tracked in the step. And once we have those semantic trajectories, we can analyze them, and for that purpose, we provide 3 different views. And the main view is the transition diagram, which basically shows the areas of interest using rectangles, and the transition between those using directed arrows. And the width of the arrow basically reflects the amount of movement between certain areas. And by having those semantic trajectories, we have another advantage because we can easily establish a similarity between them. So in our case, we use longest common subsequence. And we use that to group paths using hierarchical clustering. And to show those results of the clustering, we make use of the usual dendrogram visualization. And finally, we have the main 3D view of basically the 3D editor of Unity, which shows the detailed paths of a player or of a group of players as selected from the dendrogram, for example. So we had this tool, and of course we were then interested to see if it's actually of any use. And so we came up with a user study. We developed a small game for it, a single-player 3D game using Unity, because we needed access to the assets and all the stuff, and also because it shouldn't be a completely polished game. It should still have certain shortcomings in terms of level design, which may or may not show up in the visualization. Then we collected movement data from about 80 players, so we had them play the game, and we also collected their feedback, basically on things they didn't like so much about the game and where we struggled. And we used that later in the study. And the main study itself was with 6 experts from the game industry. Some were designers and some were programmers. And each session took about an hour. And during that hour, we had them play the game, so get familiar with it. And we then shortly introduced the tool. And the main part was basically a long open-ended task where participants could use the tool and had to analyze the data with it. And finally suggest improvement. And during that hour, we observed them, we recorded the thinking aloud, and we also conducted interviews regarding certain aspects of the game. So for example, we asked them about the usefulness of it, and in that regard, all but one expert found that it's quite useful for informing level design in general. And we were quite happy with that, because that's the main goal of the visualization. But we also had a little bit of other feedback, like 3 experts found it valuable for spotting exploitable areas, and they thought that it would also be valuable for multiplayer games, which ours was not. We had 2 experts thinking it was useful for assessing and balancing the difficulty, and we have also had one, a programmer, who immediately thought of bugs, and thought that could also be useful to spot such bugs in the level environment. In terms of the 3 views, 3 experts explicitly said that they prefer the transition diagram because it offered a nice overview of the general movement flow in the game, and also because it allowed them to see how many players reached a certain point. On the other hand, we also have 4 experts, mostly those with a design background, who struggled with getting any insights from the dendrogram visualization because we were not used to it. So we really struggled on how to interpret that rather technical representation. So in general, we can say that the experts could draw conclusions about the different paths the players were taking, how many players reached a certain point in the game, and also where players spent their time, which is also interactive with most of the patterns. And we were also quite happy to see that the experts could identify issues which were actually experienced by the players. And for that, we basically compared the player feedback with the experts' insights. So to give you a few examples, we had, for example, 2/3 of the players who said that they struggled with navigating the map, so they got lost at some point. And this could be identified by the experts using the visualization. We also had 6 players who said that they got stuck at some point, they couldn't proceed any further. And again, the experts could spot those areas where we got lost with the help of this kind of visualization, and also with the dendrogram, for example. And lastly, and this is a quite interesting case, we had 4 players who were not aware that they could control the camera. And so if we just move around with never changing the camera, and interestingly, they showed up in the visualization as well because we had a very distinct movement pattern. So yeah, so we were very happy to see that as well. We have a few more results in the paper. For now, to walk up the talk, I will just talk about some general takeaways and possibilities for future work. First of all, of course, I'm happy to say that semantic trajectories are indeed helpful for analyzing player movement. But the important thing here to say is that it's also important that the users can also access the detailed paths if required. So if you want to double check something, for example. One drawback of the visualization we had is that we basically just showed the amount of transitions between those areas and not so much the connection between the incoming and the outgoing paths. So that was lost. And in that sense, future work may focus on better conveying the connectivity between the incoming and outgoing. In terms of methodology, it's always quite challenging to assess such visualizations of gameplay data because it's sometimes quite difficult to have a certain baseline or a certain ground truth to which the results can be compared to. And in that sense, we think by collecting player feedback and collecting experts' insights and comparing those could be quite valuable in this regard. And lastly, a thing which I think is really important here is we should be aware that not all visualizations, even what we think are popular visualizations, are easily or straightforward to integrate for everybody. For example, you've seen the designers using the tendogram here. So in that sense, we should not only take the goal of the visualization into account, but should also carefully consider the visualization literacy skills of the different target users to allow them to make better use of the visualization. And with that thought, that's it from my end. Thanks for showing up.
Students of state. So your earlier map had a number of places that were meaningful. Right, places. That's what defined your map.
Yeah.
My sense was that your tool is extracting like important places automatically.
No, it's user guided basically. So the designer or the user of the tool can basically define the areas which he or she thinks is interesting for the analysis.
So then is there anything to maybe support discovery of like, right, what I
So for example, if a designer is for example interested if an item, a key or something which is necessary to proceed further in the game is really found or it's just somewhere hidden in the wood, he could use the, defining the key and the door as areas of interest here. But of course you could derive them automatically from the movement data by using some clustering algorithm, for example.
I got you. So I don't know if you, from what I understood, I assume you don't actually have a great answer to this question. But it's a really interesting possibility for future work is so it's cool that your viz helped the designers sort of recover the challenges players profess to experience. But I'm really curious to hear about how does using a tool like this help the designers come up with the solution to the problem that they see. So would this affect not only detecting the problem, but also how they might ideate and think about solving it?
Yeah, I mean, one way they can see it is basically if, for example, an item is missed, so nobody is moving over there, they can have a look at the visualization and move it, for example, to an area where the majority of movement has passed through, for example. So basically, yeah, it provides basically an overview of how many players traverse a certain area in the map, given that you have, of course, defined the proper areas of interest. But again, you could use some automatic level subdivision and algorithm to help with that. And I think that would be something for future work because it's quite a time-consuming process if you really want to have a large level and you need to define lots of those areas.
Hi, much other comments?
Okay.
Leiden University, Netherlands. More questions. One is the tool currently available. Is it possible to download it?
I don't think so. I would have to check with Ruben. But yeah, I can let you know.
And the second one is it possible to map movement in 3D space, or is it protected?
So, I mean, the movement is currently tracked in total 3D. We just then project it for visualization onto the plane. So basically, you don't have to do that. So you could basically also visualize it in 3D environment using cubes, for example.
But specifically areas of interest that could be.
Right now, it's a rectangular quad-like area, but of course, that could be extended as well, that you're using circles or something like that.
Thank you.
Hello, Pedro. Answer Pedro Harris. I have a question. This is super interesting work. Thank you very much. Your example here is traversing an environment effectively. I'm wondering, could you see this being applied to traversing a menu?
Yeah, basically you could do the same thing. Then you would define different buttons or different areas of the menu as your areas of interest.
And the analysis behind it essentially.
Yeah, so once you basically have derived those semantic trajectories, it would follow the same steps as here.
Alright, thanks.
Okay, let's move on. Now we have another topic. Okay, so now we have a paper called Looking Outside the Box, Reflecting on Gaze Interaction Gameplay by Angelis Gomis and Anis Gallet.
Great, thank you all for being here. My name is Hennis, and today I'm going to be presenting this work that I'm doing with my friends at Lancaster University about new ways to play using eye tracking technologies. So, for today, I'm going to talk about gaze interaction, and as you can see, how it's being used now. For example, in Assassin's Creed, the player could just look at the objects that they want to interact with to collect them. We have other examples, like in the Tomb Raider, in which the player could automatically aim the gun towards the enemies that they want to shoot. These two examples show how gaze has been embraced now using this interaction metaphor of what you look at is what you get. This provides more accessible gameplay, make the performance of the controller, and even enhanced immersion. However, in my research and also throughout my PhD, what I'm investigating is, what I'm exploring is how can we play with gaze differently, creating more challenging experiences, and investigating which new metaphors could we use away from the one that is currently used. So today I'm presenting this game called Twilight. That is a collection of 3 mini-games that are played using the keyboard for navigation and gaze interaction. So the 3 games pose collection tasks that need to be solved quickly and deal with external events that are affecting the puzzle solving, such as attacks from other characters. So in these games, what we wanted to introduce were challenging dynamics. So it was really hard to play with gaze. And by doing that, we introduced ambiguous rules and intuitive interactions to create a sort of tension and check how that would open up the space for gaze interaction and create new metaphors. So in order to explain each game individually, I'm going to describe them using the themes that we report in the paper. and that those are the things. But if you want to know more about the thematic analysis or the rigor of the study, you can read the paper. And today I'm just going to use them to introduce, I'm just going to use 3 of them to introduce the 3 different games and tell you about what we learned about the players using playing the games. So the first one relates to visual dilemmas and the fact that during the game the players needed more time to adapt to the dynamics, but also they were balancing where they were looking and how long were they looking in specific locations of the game. To better understand this concept, I'm going to show you here the witches game, in which the player controls this witch that needs to be collecting, recruiting the other witches, so to save the captured fellow. While the player is solving that, you can see that there's going to be some attacks from villagers that they want to burn the witch, and the player, by looking at them and tapping a key, they can cast a water spell to repel them. But the game has a twist, and is that because magic comes with a price and looks draw attention, wherever the player is looking, there's one villager that is always going to go there, and it's going to kill any character that finds in the way, as you can see here. It's a little bit brutal. But this poses a challenge because intuitively we will look at the place where we want to go, but because we have these spoiling activated intentions, the players have to adapt on how they could solve the puzzle. So to do that, what we saw that they were doing in order to succeed is to avoid looking where they wanted to go, and they adopted this strategy of looking at one of the corners of the screen to keep the enemy away, and then therefore we assume that they were relying on what they were seeing in the peripheral vision and switching between focal vision, actively using focal vision and peripheral vision when they had to attack the villagers that were carrying the flames. So this effect makes us reflect on the importance of designing with the whole potential, but by thinking on the whole potential of gaze in mind, and is very in line with my research and previous research that I've published that explores gaze as not just the place where we look, but also to consider where we are not looking, or what happens when we are not looking, when we're avoiding to look, when we have to deal with different events that happen at once, or playing with different levels of visual attention, such as relying on peripheral vision. So with this as a little takeaway, we encourage game designers that want to implement games with games to think about these possibilities and not limit yourselves to think about where you look, but also this whole spectrum of what would happen when happen is designed for things that happen when you are not looking. The next thing is called metaphors, and this comes from the fact that through my design-led research practice, I consistently use narratives and metaphors of games to explain those challenges that I introduce in the games. So in the case of Twilight, they were like really very challenging dynamics. So I use cultural metaphors to explain why those dynamics apply. So in the case of the witches, again, as I told you before, there's looks of low attention, and that magic comes with a price, and I use that to kind of support that there's a spoiling of the intention of the player. If we look at other cultural references, we have again based on the picture of Dorian Gray, in which the player controls Dorian and needs to collect pieces of the frame. But Dorian is so narcissistic that you need to look at him to make him move. And when the player moves the character, everybody moves at the same time. What happens here is that the challenge is that the field of view is limited, and we're forcing or imposing this rule of looking at Dorian. So what happens is, like if you haven't noticed, is that all the characters take the frames, and that's a danger. So to solve this puzzle, the player that is controlling Dorian and is Dorian could look at other characters to intimidate them, so they will not move, and then you could arrange the characters in this puzzle so you could safely collect the frames. But why is this helpful for? So the players could use the smooth movement of the NPC characters to stop, for example, the attacks of the assassin that wants to kill Dorian. Then we have other kinds of metaphors, like in the third game, that are, for example, looking through someone else's eyes. So in this game, it's based on the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the context of the game, the two characters manage to separate, and they need to collect these photos to keep it this way. What we introduce here is something very challenging, and it's going to be difficult to understand, and is that Hyde are connected, and Hyde moves through Jekyll's eyes. What this means is that Hyde will move towards the point that the player being Jekyll is looking at, creating this bias mapping and making, I need to be honest, the game really, really difficult. So then the challenge was in order to succeed, the player needs to understand this mapping and solve the puzzle. So with this as a little takeaway of this theme, we see the potential of using those cultural references and metaphors of gaze that we all know that are there in fiction, they're in pop culture, and think about them as a tool for design. Because when we think about gaze has a meaning, it could be cultural, it could be behavioral, and we have a lot of references that could help us creating these new mechanics of for gaze interaction in games. Lastly, I want to introduce this theme that I called gaze identity. Spoiler alert, this is a little bit meta, so bear with me for a bit. So this theme talks about that where the players were looking at, that was representing the character that they were controlling, and also the role that they were assuming in the game. So we saw, for example, in Dorian's game, when the player was looking at Dorian, it was the player who was looking at Dorian. However, when the player was looking at the other NPC, the other characters, it was Dorian who was intimidating them, assuming this kind of double role of who is the player when they're using games. Similarly, in Jekyll and Hyde, that's more clear because both characters are connected, so you don't really know who of them you are controlling. And in the Witches game, what we found out from the analysis of observing the players play and the comments was that most of them, like 90% of the participants, reported that they were using the villager as their minion, and they felt that they were controlling that character. This was completely unintentionally, we didn't want to do that. But they felt how they were controlling the powers of the witch, and at the same time, the villager in these situations. What this made us reflect on is how gaze has this potential of maybe allowing the players to interact or to control characters that before it was impossible, such as NPCs or like it's in Dorian's case, companions like in Jekyll and Hyde, or the enemies in the Witches game. So just to finish my presentation, I want to invite you to read the paper and find out more about the other themes. And I leave you with 3 takeaways. That is, there are more gaze interaction than what we're looking at. The use of metaphors opens up the opportunity to explore the design space of gaze and support challenging interactions. And finally, gaze opens up the space to maybe control other characters in the game. Thank you very much. Any questions?
This felt a little bit like the second character from Dorian Gray, but it didn't look at me.
Running on my business. If any of you is interested, after the session, I'm presenting a poster that summarizes more or less my whole PhD, so I can talk about that. I'm basically exploring these new metaphors on what new techniques can we use to implement gaze in games that have these more challenging characteristics and are different to the current use metaphor.
Sorry, Regan University session. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why we should use gaze in games. I have a lot of students who always want to get gaze interaction in games, and because we can, as necessarily we should. and they've never managed to convince me that it's a really good idea. So I would love to hear someone's chosen to do this as a research topic. Why do you think that this is really what benefits does Gaze Interactive have over and above using some other type of input to do the same type of interaction?
That's a really good question, thank you. I feel that right now, maybe Gaze doesn't have that, is not that powerful for the game industry. Like I know that Tobii, the main manufacturer of eye trackers, are trying to push it for game design and now for esports. But where my research comes from is more or less this problem that if I were to use any of the commercial games that are published now and I remove the eye tracker, I can still play the game. So why would I spend €100 on eye tracker to play games? So that's why my research started. Like I wanted to find ways that if you remove the eye tracker, for example in Twilight, you cannot play the game because you cannot give the attention to the audience, you cannot move Jekyll and Hyde. So for me, obviously those are mini games. For me, the future of eye tracking in gaming maybe is more tied to VR experiences because I know that people are pushing hard on that, and I know that for desktop games or consoles, we have a lot of work to do because we need to find the recipes or like the frameworks to give gamers the experience that really relies or requires the use of an eye tracker.
Stefan Coy, Lincoln University. Playing a game with your peripheral vision seems to be, or I guess it would feel very strenuous, but I don't know. Do you have, from your experiences testing it yourself or with others, can you tell us a little bit more about how that was perceived?
Yeah, so to talk about that, I need to refer to a paper that we published this year in Kite, that is called Supervision. And in that paper, so Supervision is a game that is designed thinking about only using forcing the player to use peripheral vision to play. We had sessions that, from the top of my head, I think were like 20 minutes or like between 20 and 30 minutes playing. And of course, the player was feeling tired, but we cannot assume that that was for using peripheral vision of eye tracking because they were in front of a screen. There's a lot of factors that we are not sure that was really for peripheral vision. Again, that game was a short experience, so how to implement those kind of things in a longer game, this is just an hypothesis, but I could imagine a game in which you are pretending to be a spy, and then you have a partner, and you need to like hang around, seeing that you don't know each other, and then you need to work and be receiving those cues from peripheral vision, the abilities that you have in game. It's an interesting question, and it's like we don't really have the data to say, the evidence to say that that was tiring. What we found out is that people were improving in the detection of visual cues in peripheral vision after playing the games.
Thank you. Okay, let's thank
Yeah, thank you. So my short talk, so rapid communication today, is about the potential of collaboration between science and practice. So we have game research groups on the one hand, and we have game developers and designers in the industry on the other hand. And for me as a game researcher, the question is whether the work we are doing in research really finds its way into the industry, and furthermore, whether the methods we are using fit the standards and the demands of the industry. So the question is there a gap between these two disciplines? And if so, how can we bridge this gap somehow? So we talked about this topic with people from Ubisoft Düsseldorf, which is a game studio in Germany. And we particularly talked about the methods we are currently using when evaluating player experience. And we found some very interesting differences there. So in our research group, we heavily rely on questionnaires when doing user studies. So we use standardized and validated questionnaires such as the PENS, and we gather most data from that. Of course, we do some additional stuff like observing players, using physiological measurements sometimes, and we also check some basic gameplay metrics or gameplay data, such as the player score or something. But still, quite a big focus is on questionnaires. At the development studio at Ubisoft, on the other hand, they have a very different approach because they mostly have a look at players while they are playing the games, and they talk to the players afterwards. So they conduct post-game interviews, and that's their main or their most important resource of information for their evaluation of the games. And they also do a lot of gameplay metric tracking, so they have some eye tracking involved, but they mainly use this information to support the post-game interviews. And they also do some questionnaires, but they use custom questions mostly, and they have never heard about any of the questionnaires we are using in our research group or in this community. So based on these differences, we asked ourselves whether we could take some of the methods from our research and integrate it into the workflow at the Ubisoft research. So we decided to use physiological measurements, so heart rate measurement, as an example, and wanted to find out whether there is a value for Ubisoft to apply this to their evaluations. And we conducted 2 studies. I cannot go into the details of the study here. There's more in the paper about that. But what we did was that we proposed a method of stimulated recall. So we measured the heart rate of players and then had a look at peaks during play. For example, some game moments that really caused high arousal on the player, and then used this specific game moments in the post-game interviews and asked players, okay, at this specific moment, how did you feel? Was there something special about this situation? And we were particularly interested whether the game developers at Ubisoft, what they think about this method, and they agreed that there is some added value of this method, but that it could not substitute the other methods they are using. And they, interestingly, they were particularly concerned about the intrusiveness of this method, because they were really concerned asking their participants to put on a heart rate measurement belt. So the pen is really intrusive. So to come back to the initial question about the gap, we just, with this work, we wanted to encourage people to work together, and we conclude that even small collaborative projects between industry and research groups can kind of bridge this gap and have benefits on both sides. So for us, we gained a lot of insight into the industry demands and the industry methods. We also had access to their database of testers, which is also pretty cool. And we also could use, in the future, more professional prototypes for our research. We don't have to do it all on our own, but we have some input from real game designers. And on the other hand, the game studios can benefit from this because they could test new equipment and also new method without really high risk, because they can pre-test it at the university, they get some kind of workflow that's already working and tested, and they can also transfer academic knowledge into their work. Yeah, so that's the point I wanted to make today, but of course there's more in the paper, but that's the rapid communication. Thank you.
Hi, Jimmy from University of Bremen.
I have two questions. First, it sounded like that the industry, or in this particular case, Ubisoft relies more on qualitative measurements, rather we mostly rely on quantitative measurements, and I would suggest that we also have different sample sizes because of the type of questions that we are asking. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so about this qualitative and quantitative data difference, that's true, yeah. So they, for them, it's not important to calculate any p-values, for instance. So they, for them, it's more important to get a good impression of what the users are thinking. I think often in research papers, you have this kind of need to get some more quantitative data to really support your hypothesis. What was the second?
It was the first one. And the second, why did you choose physiological data? Because it's quite unusual in our community. I mean, it has huge value, of course, but we still mostly rely on synthetic measurements.
One reason was because Blue White was, Düsseldorf was not familiar with that at all, so we wanted to test something completely new for them. And also because this kind of stimulated recall method, so that you can use this data directly in the post-game interview, we thought that this really good fits their existing workflow of heavily relying on this interview data. So this was just one point that we thought we can use a very new method for them, but which can be quite well integrated into the existing workflow. So that was the main reason for that. So we also tried to convince them about some questionnaires like the GEQ. That was 2.5 years ago, so we did not yet knew about the criticism. Finally we stick to physiological data.
Now we have one people presenting on behalf of Cameron team and we campaign, which they work on ODE effective retention by in-game promotion analysis.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dong Bin-ho from Korea University. I will talk about the effective user retention by in-game promotion event analysis. I will talk about the motivation of the study and experiment of study, also result of the study. First, the motivation of study. The final goal of the game company is to maximize profit by preventing user churn and lowering new users. Previous researches focused on the engineering perspective with data mining. Many researches focused on the detecting bot that causes the loss to game company. To detecting bot, researchers use the client-side, server-side, and network logs to detect bot separately or together. Churn prediction is also conducted to predict and minimize user churn by analyzing various factors like user behavior, user types, and social relationships. In this study, we focused on the business perspective for user prevention. The game company marketing promotion is one of the most important means of retaining customers and preventing churn. So you have a curious about it's really effective. So we are trying to analyze the promotion is effective. Also, which user groups are most responsive to the game company's promotions. For the checking the effectiveness of promotion event, we try to compare the number of the concurrent user before and after the event. And we make a user groups with the character level, item purchase frequency, and game playing time ban to see which group is most effective. In this study, we used 54 million logs from the ION provided by NCSoft South Korea. This data contains about 20,000 real user data for 2 weeks period. And there are 4 different types of the events occurred middle of the period. So we can analyze the promotion effect compared before and after the number of the users. We define the churn rate as the number of the users who have not logged in the consecutive days per the number of the cumulative users logged in per day. We can see the graph. There is a peak value before the event started, and then the churn rate gradually decreased after the event. We can say that the event is useful to prevent churn in online games. Also, we can see the number of the login user increased to 18% than before the event. Especially the distribution of the user level has been changed. Before there has some difference before and after the promotion event. We want to see the why the distribution of user level has been changed. So we analyze the user groups to why. The number of the logins or the all level class users has been increased. Especially mid-level users, there is a 44% of the growing of in the numbers. Also, we saw some item purchase. The number of the item purchase after event decreased, but the actual number of the item buyers are increased about the 150% due to the event gifts or event items. And we also can see the dawn and the daytime users increased while the nighttime users are decreased. We can conclude that the promotion event is effective for experienced users, especially mid-level users. Through this information, we can suggest the user-targeted marketing. In future study, we will use more data to analyze effect and make more generation to apply the other games like mobile games or FPS games. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
This kind of events or specific items they give particular events that we promote 100% more.
Yes, I think that I have some curious about the why the events occur the make user to buy items. I think that there is a discount of the game items, so the user can more buy easily items to use, and they have more powers or more manners to play easy games.
Thank you again. So now we have almost the last one. It's not. Assessing the impact of visual design on interpretation of aggregate data visualization. It's another word. Split it several parts actually. Okay. Nora Alagi, yes.
Yes.
And Gunther Waller, Payman, Nizeba.
So, hi everyone. Presenting this work on behalf of co-authors Pejman and Gunter on where we look at assessing the impact of visual design on the interpretation of aggregated custom data visualization. So, the motivation of this research starts by how the game user research field relies on different methods that have been derived from HCI in order to evaluate the games. But in this field, there's a continuous, we're continuously trying to improve on the current techniques being used. So as a result of trying to improve on these techniques, we end up relying on mixed method approaches, such as triangulation of player movement data, players' interview comments, and physiological data in some cases. And that are being employed in the game evaluation process to lead to a more accurate understanding of the player experience. There are some challenges with this, which is we're dealing with diverse data types, so a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data. And there's also a vast amount of data that has to be analyzed and reported back to developers, which can have some challenges in this domain. So to address this, we can rely on visualization techniques to help integrate the two types of data, quantitative and qualitative, and assist in this process. So in our research, we focus on investigating the impact of different designs as an unaddressed area in game user research. Specifically, we examine visual design of aggregated data as aggregation is necessary to achieve a non-cluttered representation of the data, as opposed to relying on individual representation of the data. And this is important because an inappropriate visual design can be misleading and have a huge influence on how the visualization is interpreted by developers and designers. So I'll start by giving a brief background on the creation of the visualization before I describe the alternative visual designs we examined in our study. So in terms of creating the visualizations, we use playtesting data derived from the game Infinite Mario. And the first data we had was player movement data, and which is depicted in the blue lines and aggregated using trajectory aggregation. And the second data type displayed in the visualization is continuous data, where we looked into physiological data in the form of galvanic skin response, which is a measure of the player's arousal state. So we use a trajectory-based space tessellation technique to allow for that data to be aggregated and represented in geometric cells and overlaid following the player's traversal. And then it's color coded based on the arousal level, where yellow was low arousal and red was high arousal. And finally, the last data type we visualized was player discrete events, which was retrieved from observations of annotated playtesting videos. And they're represented in the icons you see, such as the missing a jump, for example. And a clustering algorithm was used where similar player events were clustered and positioned based on where the event took place. And they were aggregated through the size of the icon, representing the number of events contained in a cluster. In terms of the visual design properties, the first one we investigate is shading, which is either flat shaded, as you can see on the left, and where we're using a constant color for the whole cell, or smooth shaded, as you can see on the right, where interpolation of the colors takes place between the geometric cells and the tessellated geometric overlay. The second property is transparency of the tessellated region, which is either constant, meaning that the same alpha value was used across the whole visualization, seen on the left diagram, and or variable, meaning that the opacity varies between from cell to cell based on the amount of movement happening within a cell, as you can see on the right. So by combining the two properties, transparency and shading, we achieve these four visual design alternatives, where flat shaded visualizations can be seen at the top, and smooth shaded visualizations are shown at the bottom, and the constant transparency, which can be seen to the right, and the variable transparency shown on the left. So to conduct our study on assessing these four visual design alternatives, we recruited 9 professional game developers that had very different roles in the industry. The study was conducted online through Skype or Discord, and we used real-time board to administer the visualizations online. We also we recorded videos of the study, and then which we used to transcribe and use for our analysis, where we use a deductive qualitative approach with these 6 predefined categories. The evaluation started with a semi-structured interview on the participants' background and experience in the industry. And second, these participants were presented with a design alternatives, and which they examined for the similarities and got more comfortable with the different alternatives. And then we had the discussion with them on their thoughts and disadvantages and advantages of the visual properties, and then their preference in terms of transparency or shading, the two visual design properties. And then afterwards, we had the participants rate the visual design according to 6 quality measures, and we concluded the evaluation with a discussion on their ranking of each visual design from most preferred to least preferred. So this table shows the results of the ranking, where the dark green boxes represent the first rank and the light green boxes represent the 4th rank. And the key difference to note here is that the one that had the variable transparency at the top and had the flat shading was only ranked as either 1st or 2nd, while the visual design with the constant transparency and the smooth shading listed at the bottom was only ranked as either 3rd or last. Regarding the results from the coding analysis of the qualitative deductive approach, on the left you can see the number of coded statements grouped by positive and negative statements for each of the 4 visual designs. The paper will contain a more detailed overview of each of the categories for anyone interested, but I'll touch on some of the points that were made regarding to the codes. So the first one is the measure usefulness, which it was if the participants found the visualization useful for their gameplay analysis. And here we're looking at both visual designs that had variable transparency, and they both received similar comments in terms of usefulness. So there were positive comments about how they found these 2 visual designs useful for analyzing player movement and providing an at-a-glance summary. But some participants were not convinced that the variable transparency is helpful for analysis. For the second measure, clarity, it was referring to how clearly the information was displayed, and it was more concerned with the interpretation of the data. So if the representation was clear or if there was ambiguity, for example. The visual design with the constant transparency and flat shading received positive comments about how the GSR data was clear and it was easy to recognize the high arousal areas, but there was a lack of clarity with respect to offering sufficient gameplay context. And then the visual design with the smooth shading received negative comments on how there was a loss of clarity in the portrayal of arousal data in relation to the location. In the paper, we investigate how the game developers' backgrounds and roles in the industry had an impact on their reputation of the visual designs. So to discuss this, we grouped the participants into 5 under game design related background, 3 with technical background, and 1 data analyst. And regarding the first group, there were 2 participants who preferred the constant opacity, and they appeared to prioritize the readability of the GSR data, where one of the participants felt that using variable transparency for the colored tessellation makes the interpretation challenging. And the rest of the designers and data analysts all preferred variable opacity due to their prioritization of readability in terms of extracting the frequency of player traversal, and preferring the getting at a glance summary. Regarding the technical group, they all preferred variable opacity, with one participant highlighting that the opacity can dictate the importance of arousal information based on how many players are affected and supports in decision making. And lastly, the data analysts preferred variable opacity and flat shading. And one quick note to make that the data analysts and designers reflected similarly with a focus on effective readability when interpreting the visual designs, while the participants with a technical background wanted to extract how severe the data is based on the amount of players affected and to understand the reasons behind outlier behavior. Additionally, based on the interviews, we've compiled a summary of benefits and limitations of the 2 investigated visual properties. Due to time, I'll just briefly mention 1 or 2. For example, smooth shading gave a sense of progression and fluidity in GSR data. What was harder to extract high and low values, while regarding variable capacity, supported in the at-a-glance summary. So to conclude with our contribution, we implemented 4 visual design alternatives, often aggregated data visualizations. We discussed the advantages and limitations of each in the paper based on the study we conducted with the professional game developers, and then we also discussed the importance of visual design and how different designs of one part of the visualization may affect the readability of the whole. And thank you very much. Here I have a link in case you're interested to see the data, which we'll be uploading in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Alex Berg, Eindhoven University of Technology. Thank you very much for a great talk. I'm interested if you have an intention in the future to quantify if the if developer or if people are analyzing gameplay, if they're able to better spot basically issues during gameplay in a quantified way, right? So you're looking right now at the visualization itself, they're understanding better the larger context, but we actually want to quantify if they are looking for issues in gameplay basically.
Like through observation or just watching the videos themselves?
Yeah, like through watching videos themselves, for example, or for actually designing a study that basically has, I don't know, small issues built in, they're able to stop that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So having more tasks defined to see if the designers or developers can spot specific issues in the level. So we actually did a previous paper which we published in PI that looked specifically comparing individual representation of the data and the visualization, or when we're aggregating that, and where we gave some tasks to the players to see if they can spot specific issues in the game. So we have a more there's a paper and that's called Aggregated Playtesting Data. If you're interested, that will have more examples of that, but definitely future work could further look and enhance on that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Kind of a follow-up, which is to what extent you think the mindset of professional development would influence what I'm trying to achieve as a designer, if you notice any specific what the person is trying to
achieve from yes. So certain, for example, developers were interested in spotting severity or where are areas that have high impact issues. So they relied more on larger icons that represented there's clusters of specific events happening there. Designers look more at the impact of the challenge and difficulty in the game, and they use the color arousal. So there are some differences in what different roles want out of the
We are passing this further close to Mark. We open immediately. We are age 83 in the game.
Thank you. So my name is Carsten Vis and I'm from KU Leuven. Before we start, if my university has asked you a difficult question, I would urge you to not seize the opportunity to get revenge. No, so first of all, I want to thank Katrien de Bertelsma and Wim van Abelen for collaborating on this project, which is an exploratory study on detecting cognitive aging through card games. For those who are not familiar with cognitive aging is the phenomena of cognitive functions changing while they get older. Typically, these cognitive functions are divided into two types of intelligence, crystallized and fluid. Crystallized intelligence is the accumulation of facts and knowledge throughout your lifespan, and as we can see on the graph, this tends to increase the older you get. There's also fluid intelligence, which comprises of attention, working memory, executive function, which allows you to tackle and solve new problems efficiently. Currently, I'm somewhere over here, which means I only have a few years left, so I really need to start working on my dissertation. So how can we find these cognitive traces? Well, research has turned to digital biomarkers, and the definition you can see here is the one by John Turros. So we can find these digital biomarkers in day-to-day interactions with technology. They can be found in text interactions, GPS location, but also in games. I found a paper from two fairly unknown researchers, perhaps you do know them, it's Mendrack and no, it's awesome work from them, which vouches to use games or digital biomarkers to find low-level cognitive and motor processing functions. Detecting cognitive functions through games is not a novel concept. There are already a lot of very nice games which excel in this, but we do notice that in the serious games, after a while there's a problem with attrition. So we see that gameplay sessions drop over time, and especially if we're going to follow up people for a longer period of time, this attrition should be solved. So that's why we thought, well, can we use commercial off-the-shelf games, and especially card games, to detect differences in cognitive performance due to aging? But then the problem arrives, like, how do we get information from these games which we do not have access to? We do not have access to the source code, so how do we get information from there in the form of digital biomarkers? So we developed a toolkit using computer vision and machine learning, which automatically annotates data, sees how you're playing the game, how you're doing stuff correctly, transforming them into these potential digital biomarkers for performance, and store it into a database. So normally the right part is invisible for the user, and you can only use, and you can only see the left part, which is the standard Clonex FreeCell Windows 10 implementation. So we created this toolkit. What did we do with it? So we captured information from the game of FreeCell, we put it into a machine learning algorithm, and we see whether we were able to distinguish between younger adults, middle-aged adults, and older adults. So we captured these potential digital biomarkers from 52 participants from the age groups, 8 to 25, 45 to 55, and 65 plus. And we let every participant play 3 different games. So what did we put into the machine learning algorithm? We put things like game results. How long did they think of a move? And if they thought of a move, how long did it take them to execute that move? We also captured things like the number of moves they made, how much errors they did, and also the error streak. So if they made a mistake, how many times would they retry to make that move? So first thing we checked is like what correlates with this age group. And the thing that correlated the most with was average think duration. So we saw that older adults took a longer time to think of a move. The second thing which was heavily negatively correlated was the game result. So older adults did not manage to win as much games as their younger counterparts. Older adults also spend more time per game. And also the standard deviation of how long they thought of a move was also heavily correlated. So we did not only see that older adults took longer to think of a move, but they were also more credible. So for the machine learning algorithm, we also plotted an ROC curve, for people who are unfamiliar with this, you see in the red dotted line that is a random classifier, so an algorithm that has it right 50% of the time, and the goal is to beat that 50% chance algorithm. A perfect classifier would be then the purple line, because that would mean you have a maximum amount of true positives instead of false positives. Our machine learning algorithm could choose 3 things, so middle-aged, older adults, or younger adults. So we have 3 ROC curves. So we can see in the light blue and the dark blue the ROC curve for younger adults, and we have an area of 0.88 and 0.81 for those. So we can say that our machine learning algorithm was successful in detecting these classes. However, we can see that for middle-aged or adults there was a problem, and we performed less well than the random guesser. So these are the results for every class separately. If we combine them, we arrive at a AUC of 0.734 and an accuracy of 0.63. Are we happy with these results? Well, it depends. It's certainly better than the 0.33 that the random guesser would have, but it can certainly be improved. So what do I want you to take away from this presentation? That machine learning was successful in classifying younger and older adults, but had difficulties with the middle-aged adults. And also, casual card games lend themselves to capturing potential digital biomarkers of cognitive performance. So we can use games that already exist, that have been made by all other people, for research and to see how people are doing for the cognitive performance. I would like to thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I'm more than glad to answer them.
Okay, we have time for even questions.
Hello. Jessica Rivera, Beacon University. Can you tell us a bit more about your also labeler?
Yes, of course. Let me just go back to it. So our auto labeler is triggered by the user interacting with it. So the moment the user interacts with the game, we analyze the screen. So you see in the beginning, when we start playing, it will So in the beginning, it makes a representation of the board. So you start the game, it automatically starts classifying each card, and when the user starts clicking and using the board, it will update that board. And based on these interactions, we calculate those digital biomarkers, which were specified in the other slides. Yeah, we made something with machine learning that can classify cards and interpreted game rules.
Simon Herman, University of Heidelberg, New Zealand. My question is, what happened with those participants who are between 56 and 65 years old?
56 and 65.
Because you had 3 categories, one was 45 to 55, and the other one was 65 plus.
So there's a category between.
Yeah, we did not include those people because we wanted 3 distinctive age events in the hope that it would become clear that you can see this cognitive aging because it's a continuous kind of thing, so just these 2 distinct age events.
Okay, so you decided to not have this group in between.
Correct.
Hi, Derek Ashton, interesting stuff. I had a different question, which I'll ask you later. But following up on that last one, why go with bins? Why not just predict how old they are?
Here's an interesting question. So we decided on classification because we wanted to explore whether it was possible. This is a first exploration, and classification is easier than training regression model, continuous models. So that's why we chose for this setup.
Hi, Michael Smilovich, Ryerson University in Toronto. I'm curious if you considered using a different type of analog task as opposed to a digital one, and maybe something with less physicality, just because elderly people tend to move slower, and that's not necessarily due to cognitive loss. I mean, it's motor function, and they also might be less familiar with a digital task as opposed to an analog. So I'm wondering if that may have contributed.
Yeah, that's true. We did take their computer use into account, and amongst the different agents, there was a slight difference indeed in computer use. However, I think I have a slide on that. So we can see that indeed the average mood time differs for older adults, but it's not that different. So probably the machine learning algorithm did pick that up, but it was certainly not the most correlated factor.
Hello, my name is this on? Okay. Dennis van den Laden von Rio Leuven. I actually, one of the things I was missing at your introduction there is like, what is the essential benefit of creating that machine learning algorithm when right now it's for very specific visual tasks mainly. I mean, there's obviously some cognitive improvement there. It's very clear task of probably visual memory that's happening there. So what's the benefit then of creating this machine learning algorithm?
Well, with this study, we wanted to see whether it's possible to detect cognitive traces in games that were not built for that purpose. In follow-up studies, we will do similar experiments with people with, for example, mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's dementia, to see whether we can discern them based on the gameplay.
That you would need to be with way more data to be applicable than right now. Because right now it will only work for that specific result game.
Yes.
University of Saskatchewan. Quick clarification, following up on Eric's question, were you doing a three-state classifier or three iron classifications?
So it was three-state classifier, but it's not possible to calculate an ROC of three-state classifier, so we plotted three individual ones.
That's fine. My actual question is about the slipperiness of this middle-aged group, or so hard to predict. Do you think it's because of like a greater variability in actually that particular group's behavior, where things start to diverge with your
That was also our assumption based on the theory that indeed these middle-aged adults were like drifting a little bit alongside those other groups. You can also see that over here that indeed these middle-aged adults were equally classified as younger and older, so they were really drifting over there. Yeah. It would have been easier if we had just done younger versus older adults. So.
I have a question. You're talking about net.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. So we classified calendar age and not biological age. And whilst there's a correlation between calendar age and cognitive performance, it's certainly not a linear one and highly different for people, individuals. So yeah, that probably also explains why the accuracy is not optimal, because there are older adults which probably perform better than younger adults.
Yeah, you can have that effect. I can share with the work. We did something like we can learn marketing what we education using measurements as public place, and that we have plans that.
Yeah. We're currently doing a study with elaborate cognitive batteries to better see how cognitive functioning impacts casual car gameplay. Okay.
We conclude this last paper session. So please enjoy the coffee that's still there and the poster. You can still go and get poster.
Quick question.
The copyright that were handling signage was facing, and then they say, okay, we need this information with the agreement, you know, maybe 1, 2 weeks. I think that are signed with I think it was, yeah, I have this so maybe they can send you
Yeah, that's unclear. That's still unclear.
Yeah, I'll work around it.
Yeah, it looks like
En fait, j'ai eu énormément d'échanges. Mais ouais, en fait, elle avait toujours, elle a laissé plein de trucs. Ouais. Ah, pardon,
Hopefully in order of combination. I don't know how to really process it. Nicole always calls me Daniel.
That's true.
Yeah, no, actually, today, my daughter took care of
So you essentially look at dropping a
and then you have the flow slide, which is the first theory of Rush. The observer can look around concepts like other kind of visual screens and green screen just use a mirror. So let's say that's we don't have a large size, just it was just like a couple of minutes.
I think you're not wrong, right? So it's like in terms of, like, for example, awareness would be like a starting point, right? So aware of the sessions and also awareness of
yeah, so it's like for the Eskimos, it's like
I think what's understood here is but then what are you actually focusing on? I think that's yeah, but it's like all those different things that they work in interfaces that accelerate. What's you already predefined the people who go well with each other, right?
So my PhD itself, the current rule says there's the actual
Okay.
Hi, I'm asking for Janet here. Critical thinking. I email with clarification from Jim Morgan.
You would likely want to do both.
Does the reference number start with like B9? Okay, cool. Got it right then. B904504. Alright, thank you.
No. They're really, willing to put you record it, right? It's very technical as well. It's extremely like the time in which they actually get it out of the pitch, right? The pitch is no, there's no right there. Right.
So a lot of the data is very
Yeah, like if Max turns at least like cockpit tracking or one off positive communication as well. Like people were really able to bring people together, like calm them down and or like studying. Right, it's like yeah, there's a lot of GGs, but there's also like great second the be respectful parts. Like kind of someone starts speaking up and it's like okay, I actually want to win this match. Like just being respectful kind of messages and then people are like the ideal situations where like. Oh, sorry, I really didn't mean it that way. And then they shut up about it. Like,
Are you on the phone right now? Kind of. I'm basically on hold, but I can answer some questions. Just curious what you know about this camera. I don't know anything about it. I'm not even a video person. Hi. I was just wondering, I was double checking, making sure I was going through the stuff set up for Constance, and it says that paperwork was completed with the gold service, but not the silver. I wanted to make sure what paperwork was completed by you. The video people will be answering. My query is about the export paperwork. Part. I'm not sure. I was just going through, and because we have so many emails, it's hard to look through all of them at once. I was just making sure that the export paperwork is being completed on y'all's end, and that the only thing I have to really bring as far as paperwork is the fit to fly and her vaccinations and stuff. Okay, thank you.
But it was specified. I mean, we're doing exploratory work. We don't really have a reference point, so it's good that the community is my reference point instead of other papers. So that's certainly good. And Eric can also gather that as and picking up stuff that we can use for the yeah, thank you. No, but that's justified, and we're certainly going to address the situation in the future studies. Yeah, we're going to make it as airtight as possible. It's going to be different. No, it's never airtight. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's very different things. I hope in the co-op states, same
Yeah, this would.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah. And I was very happy to have more work we can do.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's good. Okay. Glad to hear. And this is like, I wanted to check now because I know this is like the last chance to check with everything before the day out. Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. You too. Bye.
¿Aquí sonido? ¿Significa el sonido?
I need to change the volume of agents and see whether you can find something and then have a little trial for those things.
Sí, hombre, ahora el movimiento que necesitamos, si se queda cuando hace sí, sí,
Me llamo el bajo, ¿eh?
I now want to play this game.
Sí, sí, bueno, no está en marcha, pero al principio iba a presentarlo y después y además
We can use this for two reasons. So, at first, it is the second opinion for the doctor.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And also the second thing, like for my impairment, people have a 60% of going into dementia, the 40% is stable. From the moment they start progressing into real dementia or Alzheimer's, you need to get that. But when you see
No me lo quites.
Sí.
Sí.
Hola.
Sí, hola.
Hello.
¿Al pasador?
Ah, salando. No, la gente buscaría a la persona que...
Bueno, que teniendo el portátil pues
Ya, pero ahí que no.
My computer. You can touch my
Okay.
computer.
I'm a rebel. I'm eating inside. So I'm good.
I mean, you could do what I did. You could do what I did earlier. McDonald's inside.
In here?
Yeah, I saw you had
Holy
McDonald's.
shit.
I was pretty jealous.
It was a single nugget.
Mm-mm.
Okay, maybe two.
That's true rebellion. I'm jealous.
You had That is weird. What happened at 12? I'm okay with the dozen. I want more.
Well, there's one just across the street, right?
Yeah. And he keeps getting coffee there.
Yeah.
A
Every
little
morning.
bit. What's Costa coffee like?
Okay. Not great. Not that I don't know great coffee. I'm not really
No, I mean like in comparison to McDonald's coffee.
Probably McDonald's better from what I hear from my wife. I like McDonald's more.
Well, I think Canadian McDonald's coffee is better than European McDonald's coffee, though, which is weird.
Mm-hmm. Slightly strange.
You just want 5 minutes, right?
5 to 10. I'm giving you a voice.
I don't have any
I'd say like 2
slides.
minutes is fine.
gonna sing it in jazz.
I prefer that.
Volunteering.
Do a volunteer.
So how quickly can we get a some kind of saxophone background music to go to that? That's all we need.
We
That's all
can
you
just
need.
beatbox this. I'm
That'd
looking
be
at
good.
everybody's
I'd
cards,
go for that.
trying to find your. Perfect.
I really enjoyed your talk, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Very lovely.
Yeah, it was
Very
hard to try and cram everything into 10 minutes. I was a bit.
Yeah, I was like, there's
bit
a
nervous.
lot of analysis.
Yeah.
But I thought you did a great job. I don't know what was missing, and so that's good.
Mm.
Like, it's often you listen to a talk and you're like, I know what's missing.
Yeah, well,
And I wish
it's-
I knew it.
I had an original version where it was the very traditional
Yeah.
background research questions, and it was too stilted in 10 minutes. So it was like,
Just works. It's a
let's
nice story.
do 4 observations and then just build on
Yeah.
essentially what we did. So
Yeah.
that's good time.
It's good talk. Interesting stuff. Better your paper. I'll see what
What are you doing?
All right, 5 minutes, you say?
Keep on with your
At
work.
the very end.
Oh, not at the very end.
I mean, I have no
No,
problem with that,
this
but.
talk.
Oh, before the hand.
Yeah,
doing this
before
before the
very end.
awards.
Sorry, not the very end, the very last session. Start of the very
Volunteering,
last session.
very boring moments here. But I was just gonna do like, why volunteer?
When do you
In
get
what
paper?
ways can you volunteer?
Yeah.
Those
Or
of
you can watch
that
this
feel
here.
you got something to give.
Yeah.
We want
You wanna
to
take
do. Yeah, exactly.
You wanna give it to
Stare at
me?
make sure no one steals
I'm
it.
here to
Okay.
I'm not bad.
Oh, you got it. It's easier.
missing a section from your windows. I can get them.
Oh, I
Oh,
can.
you're here now.
If you run out, just snap
She's
your
here now,
fingers out. Tell it.
Idea with.
Well, that was my first. Anyone here who has something they want to give? Do you want to give it to me?
Okay, sure. Is it this reading side or should I just press the button?
I believe it's live on something.
Maybe I have light because I haven't done this. I haven't done this so much.
Then I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like very. Example of
Yeah,
the aesthetics developing inner customer
Hey, not bad. Hey, are you gonna be around later to chat?
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. Back and forth with JP. Jimmy's had mindset master, can't take a mindset. I just did.
Well, that's great. But also, yeah.
Ready to practice. Yeah.
Whenever you try to have one thing for everyone. Yeah, we. Okay, so we will be beginning now for people outside. So we finish your last paper session and the conference is coming to an end, but let us do the closing keynote. So today I'm very happy to have here Adrián Cuevas, who is the founder and technical director of Novana Studio. And he will present us about the creativity process of smashing the game. So let's thank you.
Well, hello. First of all, thank you to the organization to invite me. It's an honor to be here. I don't know if you all know, probably not all of you know about Gris. Gris is a video game that we have developed here in Barcelona. Our company is called Nomad Studio. It's our first game as a company. And it's kind of a 2D platformer, like an old school Mario, but we focus more in the art, the music, the narrative of the game. So for the ones who don't know the game, I'm going to show you first the first trailer that we did, that we did trailer of the game. Well, obviously it's 13 December last year. The game is out, you can buy it. So you should buy it. So, well, first of all, I would like to say that probably we're going to be off track tonight with this talk. I'm very sure you have been hearing a lot of great presentations with numbers and data, but I'm not going to be like that. This is going to be different. I hope your mind relaxed and don't think about too much, just get some inspiration. We'll explain a bit the story of how we create this game, some decisions we made when we were creating the game, designing, narrative-wise, a bit of everything, and the whole process of the game. So you will know a bigger let's say the bigger picture of how we create this game. And some of the things I think are quite cool, good things to know when you are creating a new game or when you are deciding how to interact with the player in some of the things. So first I will introduce myself. As Joan says, I'm Adrian Cuevas. I'm the technical director and one of the founders of Nomada Studio. But when I studied here in Barcelona. I studied at my university here. My first work was actually as a biomechanical engineer. I was working in motion capture for that biomechanical analysis. And I decided that I wanted to do video games, so basically I quit and I went to England looking for a job. And my first job was in Brighton, where I was working for BAS. A lot of people don't know, in Europe was kind of a big thing. It's an interactive TV show that you play in the PlayStation with these big red buttons and colors. And after that, I had the chance to go to Ubisoft Montreal. I worked in Far Cry 3 for more than 2 years. Then I went to Denmark, where I worked in the Hitman franchise. And finally, I came back to Barcelona. I started working in Ubisoft Barcelona again. And here I work in several games. Probably the most important one is Rainbow Six Siege. Then, briefly, I will introduce you my two partners. One is Roger Mendoza. He studied in Barcelona with me. That's where I met him. And he has worked in Ubisoft Montreal for like almost 6 years. He worked mostly in Assassin's Creed and also Sunwide Skateboarding and also Rainbow Six. And the third part of this team is Conrad Roset. He's a renowned artist from Barcelona, but he's actually from Terrassa. And he has been working with big advertising companies for a while. He has done some adverts for Adidas, Nike, Disney, Coca-Cola, so a lot of things. But probably his most well-known exhibition has been, this work is called Musas, and it has been exhibited all over the world. It has been exhibited in London, San Francisco, Los Angeles, pretty much everywhere. And the thing is that he never worked in video games, but he always had an itch for it. He liked a lot playing video games. And like most of the good adventures in life, our adventure started in a bar. That's what it happened. Basically, I had to go to Montreal again for 4 months to work in Rainbow Six, and I was doing like a farewell party. And by chance, we met with a friend that was celebrating her birthday party. And Conrad was one of the guests of the birthday party. But we didn't know him. Basically, we sit all together, and by chance we set Roger, me, and Conrad together and start talking. And basically, Conrad told us that he always wanted to make a video game, but never did it before. So he was looking for people to help him do it. And to be completely honest with you, we were quite drunk. So I thought, this is going nowhere. I'm going to Montreal in 2 days. Let's forget about it. But I was saying yes, obviously, but yeah. Luckily for me, Roger stayed here in Barcelona and kept talking with Conrad. And 4 months after I came back, oh yeah, I forgot, by the way. This is the first draw that Conrad did of the game when we were in the bar. He drew that in a paper, and he said, I want to make a game where the colors are very important. I want to start, yeah, you can see. Yeah. But he said, okay, that was everything we saw, and like, okay, it's pretty, it's nice. Yes. But he wanted to start in black and white and get in color. That's kind of the key part of the game. No? Anyway, so as I say, I left, but luckily Roger kept talking with Conrad, and when I came back, they told me, hey, we have been still talking about this, we want to make it, are you in? And I said, well, of course. So the first thing we did, bear with me, is very rough, but it was a small prototype trying to show a bit the idea of the game we have in mind. It's just a very small part of the game that shows which type of game, because sometimes it's hard to explain which type of game you're making. You need to do, even if it's a small prototype. This one, as I say, very rough, very sketchy. It's like a 2-3 frames animation for the character, very ugly, but it shows a bit what I'm talking about. you see, it's pretty rough, but it was showing a bit the mood that we wanted to get with the game. So that was the first thing we did, and when we saw that it worked, we started working fully in a prototype. Basically, we quit our jobs and started dedicating 100% of our time on it. We hired a couple of people to help us with it. This is the studio that we were in a co-working trying to make the game. And what we decided to do is doing like a 15 minutes prototype and bring it to Gamescom in Germany to show it to several publishers. Luckily for us, one of the publishers liked it a lot, and it was Devolver Digital. You might know Devolver Digital is one of the biggest independent publishers, independent game publishers in the world. And to be completely honest, when we sold them the game, we had no hope at all because they are more used to do games like this, which obviously that's not Greece, or even weirder things like that. I'm not gonna comment. But luckily, they like it, so we are in. We were able to start a team, create a company, Nomad Studio, and we stayed working in production almost 22 months. And after the 22 months, finally, we released the game. This is basically the team that we have here in Barcelona. It's kind of a weird team for a video game company because almost 80% of the studio never worked in video games before. So that's quite weird, but at the same time, it was very refreshing. We had a lot of cool ideas. They weren't used to work like the video games work, especially the artists. We had to obviously tell them what is RAM memory and stuff like that. You know, like the resolution is not infinite, like when you do a poster. So things like that was kind of hard at the beginning, but we get along very well, and they have really good ideas, and they were thinking outside what is a common game usually, right? Anyway, so that was very good for us. And today I want to show you a bit these 5 points of the creation of Gris. First I will start with the narrative, art, animation design, and music. Narrative, for us, was a very important thing and a really challenging one, because when you have some limitations on resources, like we did, you have to try to turn these kind of limitations in strengths. So one of the first decisions we made was not having any text, not having dialogues, not having UI. So basically trying to avoid localization, trying to avoid more work. So for us that was very important, but it was challenging as well. The good thing is that we decided to go for a game that was going to be very artistic. The music is very important, and trying to express everything with just that, gameplay, art, and music. But that means that sometimes it's really hard to express a story. So what we did, it was going for a very common story, very common feeling, that is grief. So basically that's the basics of our story. And we went for a very metaphorical way of explaining this. That has a really good thing and a really bad thing. The good thing of going metaphorical is that people can project their own stories. So if you just hit the basics, have symbolism, trying to convey the feelings with the music and the art, they will see, they can feel that is happening something, and you can convey a lot of feelings. And most of the people actually project their own story on this grief of feeling. Being metaphorical, this grief feeling also relies to kind of a depression, like a general depression. So pretty much everybody has passed through some rough phases in their lives. So when you are playing the game, a lot of people are thinking like, "Wow, I'm feeling like what I felt when I lost my father," or things like that. We have received a lot of emails and a lot of comments. You can see it on YouTube, for example. A lot of people playing, and when they finish, it's like a catharsis for them. They're like, "Fuck, this is like when I lost my father. I was stuck for a year." I received an email of someone that lost his brother a week before playing Gris, and he wasn't able to talk to anyone about it. And after playing, he sent us an email right away saying that for him it was a help to cope with this problem. So that's really, very rewarding for us. It's something that obviously when you do the game, you don't try to achieve that high levels, but you would like to. And for some people, it was really touchy. The problem is that at the same time, some people didn't really connect with it. Luckily for us, it was just a few. But these people, they will see just a very plain and monotonous story because you are not telling them what's happening, what they have to feel. If you don't feel it, that's the problem. Anyway, for most of our players, it worked really well. So how we did this, first of all, we did this diagram. This is kind of our own version of the hero's journey, if you know about movies. So we did this first so we can have like a map of the whole progression of the game. This is the game from start to finish and what's happening in the middle. And it helps us a lot to keep the pacing of the game. So you know at the beginning it must be a bit slower, then you go up, then you have the classical breaking point, then you have to come back. Well, it's a classical structure for movies. And then we map all these bigger events that we wanted to have, so we can also know that every 10, 15 minutes there was always something happening. So when we were doing this, we contact with a psychologist that is also a game designer, Héctor Fuster from Barcelona, and he helped us a lot looking for the symbolism of the story, how we could, spread some of the things during the game, so people could understand a bit that we are talking about this process of grief. Once we had this, we start thinking about the world. So again, limited resources. We wanted to go first for an open world kind of Metroidvania that you could go wherever you go, whenever you go, whenever you want. But the problem is that that's a lot of work, especially when you have a world that is evolving, that is getting colors like us. You will have to do pretty much every part of the world 5 times because we have 5 evolutions. So because of this, we changed for a more linear approach. And to be honest, I think it was a really good decision because it also helped us a lot to guide the player. When we are aiming to go for people that never played video games before as well. So we try to have a really broad community of players. Because we thought that with the arts that we have, with the music that we have, a lot of people that never play video games, they will see the trailer and they will say, wow, that's beautiful, I would like to try it. And if it's something really hardcore, they will say, wow, that's too tough, I'm not going to do that, it's really challenging. I will look at the video or YouTube or whatever, and that's it. But then when you have a linear experience, you can tell them exactly what they have to do, they don't get lost. It's much easier to control what the player is going to experience. In any case, we tried to go for a kind of this linear open world. It doesn't make any sense, but it's how we call it, linear open world. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to tell you or that you feel that the whole world is changing, even that you are not seeing everything again. So what we did is creating this hub. This is like the center of the world. So the player passes through this place like 4 or 5 times. So he will see how it changed the colors, how it changed this part. So he can have the idea that the whole world is changing because you are seeing this many times and it's changing. And also, when you are playing on a level and you unlock a color, you will still play a little bit more for that level coming back, and you will see how that world has changed. So you see that world changing, the main hub changing, and more or less your mind thinks like, okay, so the whole world is changing. It's not just that part. Also, another of the things that we did for Greece that is not very common in a lot of video games is doing a storyboard. For us, the color progression of the game was really important. So we had this pretty much the first month of production. Here we could also see all the key important moments of the game. And also you see how it progresses, how it started this black and white, it's getting colored, and it ends up with basically full of color. Okay, art, as you can imagine, is one of our most important tools in the game. It's one of the biggest selling points. And we decided to go for like a handcrafted, very warm, very common art. But it's not common in video games, but it's much more common like in a museum or an exhibition. So first of all, we started to create a lot of concepts. We had like hundreds of notebooks with concepts, especially from Conrad. He did a lot of these ideas. Obviously, not all of them end up in the game, but most of them did actually. And creating the character was very challenging, but it's very, very important because it's the thing that you're gonna see the most. And we had a lot of inspiration in fashion design. Back on those days, Conrad was checking a lot of magazines and web pages of fashion. And then we created our first character. That was our first idea. We liked it a lot, but there was a lot of issues with this idea. And this is one of the important things we learned during the process. We wanted to express a bit of the evolution of the story of the game with the dress of the girl. So having colors that were getting unlocked as well in the dress. But when we were doing this, we tried a few things, and we realized that having that much information in the dress was, first of all, really hard for animating. We are animating frame-by-frame animation. So that would mean that you have to animate the eye, the lines, the curves, the spots, every time you do another animation. You have to do every frame for that. That's a lot of work. And on top of that, we use the cameras a lot to guide the player. And we also do a lot of big zoom outs, so you can see beautiful concepts. And when you do a zoom out of a character with that much information in the dress, it becomes blurry and noisy, and it doesn't look good. It looks pretty bad. So we decided to try to look for something much more elegant and minimal. So this is the process that we went through, trying to get a character with a lot more simple. And this is the final design of our character. This is this. Finally, when we have this, we start working on the scene, on the environment, and the maps. For us, one of the main references are Disney movies, Ghibli movies, but also Moebius is one of the biggest references for that. And to be honest, one of the references that pretty much no one realized, and it's normal that you don't realize, is aquascaping. It's quite weird, but back in those days, Conrad was going through a very dark phase. He was creating his own aquarium, and he spent a lot of time and money making his aquarium. That probably now, I don't know where it is, but probably nowhere. And as you can see, we use a lot of this as reference. There is a kind of a branch of aquascaping that is called Iwagumi. It's a Japanese culture of aquascaping. And they pay a lot of attention to elements to create a composition. So this is basically how they do it. With a few elements, they create a beautiful composition. And we use the same thing. That was the same idea for us when creating the levels. Well, once we have all this, we start creating concepts, a lot of concepts. We were doing like maybe 5 concepts, 2, 3, 5 concepts every day. We end up with more than 1,000 concepts of the game. Obviously, some of the concepts make it to the game, but some of them didn't. This one, for example, is from another part of the story that we have, but we never made it to the game. But others were exactly like that in the game right now. Once we had this concept, the story was clear. Us, the programmers and the more technical guys, we did everything we could so the game would look exactly like the concept art. So these are a couple of examples that right now it looks very similar in the game. Okay, another of the more important things for us was animation. Animation, it was, as I said, hand by frame by frame, and it was doing by hand, obviously digital. At the beginning, Conrad had the idea of doing everything on paper, scan it, and paint it. Obviously, that was madness, and we convinced him that it was madness. There's a few teams that have tried, even one in Spain, but it's a lot of work. It's not worth it. You can do effects, you can put some paper effects, play with scan some watercolors, that's what we did, and it will look something like it was done in paper. It's not exactly the same, but it's very, very similar, and it's much more convenient. Anyway, this is the first animation we did for the running cycle. In a 2D platformer, this is the most important animation of the whole game, because you're going to see that for 3 hours. Basically, you're going to be running all the time. A few jumps, but that's the thing you're going to have to see most of the time. So it's very important you get this right. That was the first animation we did to get the feeling of the rest of the animations. So that has to be perfect. We iterate a lot over this. This is the first iteration we did of the running. We thought it was a bit too crazy, so we told the animator to go for it slightly more real. We went for something like this. Then, well, as I said, we iterate a lot. One of the times we told him, okay, go crazy with it. And he created basically a flag. But, you know, you have to try to explore as much as you can. And we finally came up with this animation. This is the running cycle we have right now. There's still a few changes. Again, the sleeve, we remove it for the same purpose. It wasn't really adding anything, and it's more work for animation. And it was also noise in the dress. So we remove it. And this is actually the cleanup phase of the animation. So it's much more clear, it goes straight to the point, and it's still elegant, it's still practical as well, so that was the best. Then we decided to express all the abilities of the character with the dress, and so we could go a bit crazy with it. This is the animation of the heavy ability, so basically the dress becomes this heavy cube, and if you want to see it in the game, this is how it looks. So again, we work a lot on those animations. This is another example. This is more like a scripted scene. So it has a bit of this Disney vibe. This is how it looks in the game. Well, once we have the main character, we start thinking about the antagonist. The antagonist of Gris is this black bird. We thought that having a game that the idea was being full of colors, the antagonist would be nice if it was black ink. So that's basically this black Chinese ink. But to be honest, we weren't sure how to animate it. And we were very lucky that our animator found this animation on the internet. When we saw this, we liked it a lot. We like this fluidity, this kind of physical fluids and liquids. So we went for this kind of movement for the ink, for the antagonist of the game. When we were creating the biggest sequences for these antagonists, first we had to do this kind of storyboard. With the storyboard, the technical and the animators and the artists decided which parts were going to be with animation, which parts should be with particles or with programming. We had to decide that. Once we have that, they do the first pass of the animation. For the first pass of the animation, you try to skip frames. You just create the key frames and in a rough line. With this, you can bring it right away to the engine and try it. So you can place everything and see if everything makes sense, if the camera is nice, and if the character and the bird fits all together. Once you have that, you create the in-between frames, you clean the lines, and then you just start doing the coloring, and finally, you put it in the game. This is just the coloring, and now it's with the textures. And this is how it looks in the game. Another of the characters we have is this eel. This is another part of the antagonist. And that was especially challenging because the eel, we wanted to make it go pretty much whenever we wanted. And it has kind of this long body. So doing everything with 2D will be a lot of work. So what we did is doing like a mix. We did the head of the eel is traditional, frame by frame animation. And we attach it to a 3D body with a skeleton. Let me see, sorry. Doesn't play? It doesn't play, I think. Sorry for that. No? Okay, well, I'm sorry. But anyway. So yeah, basically we attach it to a 3D body that is with bones. So you can animate the bones and the bones react, they can twist, they can go wherever you go. And the head is synchronized with the body, so it doesn't look like different parts. Let me see. At least I can show you how it looks. Obviously, we wanted to do all this with animation, it would be way too much. But it worked perfectly for us. Okay, then we'll talk a bit about design. Obviously, for us, it's very important this part because it's a video game. But especially the challenges we have is that we wanted to go for a broad audience. And trying to appeal to a lot of people and still not being boring is really hard. So what we did, first of all, is getting some references. Obviously, one of our biggest references is Journey. But then we have others like Limbo or Ori. We always define, when we were looking for a publisher, we would define Gris as a mix between Ori, like Journey, and Ori and the Blind Forest. That's exactly the thing we wanted to go for. And when we started deciding the abilities of the game, this is the main mechanics we have. We wanted to try to express also the evolution of the game with the abilities, and also link the abilities to the phases of the game. For example, when you get the heavy ability, the girl is able to break stuff and it's heavy, and it can break floors and jars. So that's when it's linked to the more anger phase of the girl. Or if you go to the dive ability, that dive ability is when it's in the lowest point, when it goes to depression. You go into a cave, it goes too deep in the world. So that was our way to showing this. But then we have our biggest challenge of all, which is not having them in the game. Where you have these beautiful concept art, and you have jumping on the rocks, blah, 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 but then what happens if you fail? And you cannot die. So that was a really big challenge for us when we were designing levels. We have to make a game that the failure was not dying, you don't have points, you don't have time, basically you have to, and you still have to do these beautiful things. So what we end up doing is doing a lot of contraptions and trying to design the levels properly, so if you fail, you can always come back. This is, for example, one of the ideas that we have for this area. If you fail, there's a floor there, and there's a contraption that brings you back, and as soon as you are up, it gets out. So at least you still see the clear and clean concept art. This is again another example. We are in the sky, it's all beautiful, stars, but if you fail, there's a floor there that appears with the lights. This is a main mechanic in the game in that level. There is architecture that appears just with light. So we do all these things. But it's very challenging when you design a game with no depth. Really, really challenging. Then creating the puzzles, that's very important. We were creating a lot of puzzles with the mechanics, and then deciding, trying each puzzle separately first, and then trying to do a combination of all of them, and quickly prototype it. Even if it's a really ugly prototype like this. Oops. But it's really important that you try the game as much as possible, because for us, we wanted a lot of people that never play video games to try these prototypes and told us if it was too hard. But also people that play video games and told us if it was too boring. So basically what we did is, if we found some of the puzzles really hard, but still we like them a lot, what we did is creating these optional challenges. So when you are playing the game, there is what we call a collectible, and if you want, if you feel that you can do it, you can do all these harder puzzles, and you will achieve a collectible. And when you get all the collectibles at the end of the game, it's a special reward for these people. Anyway, so when we tried with everybody and everybody was happy, we created the level. As I said, a lot of people in our studio never worked in video games, and our level designer never did. So he's an architect, so he did all the levels in AutoCAD. Basically, we have the whole wall in AutoCAD. So that's how we created the levels. Then when we have that, we send it to the artist, and they create the same version with that, making it a bit more beautiful. Then we decided which assets we need to create the wall. We did a lot of variation of the assets, so you don't see a lot of repetition, because it's a key thing for us that you see like the whole wall is unique. And then we assemble everything with the effects and the shades and everything looks like that. Finally, I would like to talk a bit about the music. The music sometimes is one of those forgotten parts of a game or a movie. And honestly, when you see a game or a movie without the proper music, it's awful. And when you add a great musician to the team, it brings your game to another level. It's like changing from second division to first division. It's really, really impressive. And we were very lucky because we met Berlinist. Berlinist is a band from Barcelona, and they never worked in video games again. But luckily for us, the main composer is a geek of video games. He loves video games more than anyone in our team. He plays a lot, every day for hours and hours. So when we told him about making a video game, he was completely on board with it. The main reference they have, there were these three basically, Icos, Shadow of Colossus, and Another World. I don't know if you have played the games, but they have really epic soundtracks. But some of the other reference they have, and as a lot of people wouldn't realize, is this idea of synesthesia. I don't know if you know what is synesthesia, but basically it's this relation between two senses that shouldn't be connected. And like, for example, it could be a taste, could be connected with a color. And there's a lot of studies and research that have been done between connection between colors and sound. So they look into past studies that you can see here, and try to compose the music for the different levels based on the color that represents the level. You see, for example, there's some notes that are more used when it's red, some where it's more with green. So they use this with composing the music. And as I was saying, the music is really, really important. I'm going to show you one of the examples we did in the prototype. When we were creating this part, this is a key part of the game. It's unlocking a color. And we had to have that in the prototype to show the people what is the game about, because it's a very important scene. And I was working in this, basically in the graphic part, and I didn't like it at all. I was like, this is impossible. It's going to be ugly as hell. But luckily for me, we tried it with the music. I saw it to the musicians. They told me a few things, and he said, okay, try with this music. And this is how it looked, and it blew my mind. So as you can see, it's very, very, very nice. The music adds a lot to this part. And we were very lucky that Berlinist was with us from the very first day. They were working with us even in the prototype. And that make us change some of the design sometimes. For example, there's another scene here that we were working, is where the girl is fighting against some wind. We were gonna just have some music on the background, but when the guys sent us the music, we liked it so much that we changed a bit the scene. We made the music a key part of the moment, and also we add some of the symbolism that we wanted to put in the game in this moment. At the beginning, this scene ended up basically getting into a cave, and that's pretty much it. But now it's much more epic, and we saw a bit of the symbolism that we wanted to show. Well, and as I was saying, we don't have dialogues, we don't have text, so we try to use everything we have to show this evolution of the game and trying to explain how the progress of the girl through this process. And one of them was also with the music. For us, as I said, one of the most important parts is the unlocking the color. So we end up coming with this idea of, as well as we are unlocking colors, we will be unlocking music as well. So during that's the scene that the music of that scene is the same as the intro of the game, and we use that theme, is the main theme of the game, for that scene, and it will be evolving with the new colors. So the first time you hear this music, or the second time you hear the music, it will be just with the most minimal version of it, is when you are unlocking your first color. This one, you're gonna hear it, there's no video, so you can just focus on the music. You hear just the basic melody, couple of instruments, just very, very, very minimal. Then when you go for the second color, you add a couple of instruments and make it a bit longer. Oops, sorry. Again, you now see the string instruments. You have seen already the blue sequence, so I will go straight away to the last one. In the last one, you will hear pretty much everything. We go full on. There's chorus, percussion, strings, every instrument we can find in the libraries. Well, finally, I would like to show you another of the trailers we have, so you can see some of the things that I have explained today. Well, that's pretty much all for me. If you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer. If you want to write an email or if you want to collaborate, I know you do a lot of things with video games like play testing or whatever. Always, if you want, drop me an email and we can always talk about it. Thank you. So, any question?
Hi, Edmund from Ontario State University in Canada. Awesome presentation.
Thank you.
You basically summarized the whole game development in one
Yeah.
less than 1 hour, which was amazing. What I wanted to ask you, you refer to iteration a lot during your presentation. I just wanted to understand how, as a design team, as a development team, how did you make that final decision on what makes it the game and what can be iteration?
That's actually one of the most challenging tasks. I can tell you a bit about my story in Montreal. When I was working in Ubisoft Montreal, I learned a role that I didn't know it existed, that in Ubisoft is called the closer. The closer is a guy that comes to your project and everybody hates, because you have been working 5 years in Far Cry, for example, and the last 3 months, this guy appears and starts cutting things. It's like, okay, you have been working a year in that feature, it's not quality enough, it doesn't add up enough to the game, and it cuts everything. So obviously you hate him, but it's needed. It's a really, really crucial part of the development. You have to know when to stop. It will never be perfect. Your game will never be perfect. So there has to be someone with that role. In our case, basically Roger and I were the two guys with more experience in the industry, and we wanted to create a game that was very artistic and very fresh. So what we did is the first year and a half, we basically didn't complain about anything. Well, yes, it was crazy, but most of the time we didn't complain about anything. We let the artists do whatever they want, the designer. So we tried to give them everything. But when it was, I would say 6 months before release or 8 months before release, we start deciding what goes in and what doesn't, and telling them, okay, you cannot iterate over this more. This is good enough. If it's too bad and we don't have time to iterate, we cut it. But that's a really, really important part of the iteration, knowing when to stop. Obviously, especially the artists, and they never made video games, they're always thinking that it could look a bit better, that it could maybe be, I don't know, nicer, and it's like, okay, that's it. It looks good. You have been seeing this for a year, so you are mad with it, but it's really good, so you need to tell them when to stop. Yeah.
Hey, Nanak, University of Waterloo. I was just wondering about the music that you showed, the progression of the different bits of music. For the decision on like what's the best, you said you iterated a lot, but again, I'm assuming this wasn't done in play testing sessions, player focused design, because you said at some point your design team just made that decision. But again, based on what is that decision made, and have you, just like you explored these different things for the colors,
yeah,
have you explored similar research on music and what provides the most impact in terms of game music, emotionally?
Yeah, well, that's something that the main composer of Blood Mist did. He did all this research. I cannot tell you exactly what he did, but I know he did, because I remember that he told us, for example, for the last scene of the game, I don't know if you have played, but the last cinematic of the game, we told him, okay, we want something that is very, how can you say, like something that will make you change the way of your feeling at that moment. You have to be depressed, and you have to, it's a moment of realization. It's a moment that you have to say like, fuck it, you know, I can still be good. I will survive this pain. No, that's what we say as designers. And he's the one saying, I know what I have to do. And he come with us. He come with our music, and he say, this music is gonna make cry 90% of the people. And to be honest, I don't know how he makes it, because I don't know. But every time I see the sequence, I cry. Actually I do it a lot, because I like a lot watching people playing that part of the game, because it's for me the most important part. And I know it sounds like probably a sociopath, but I love to see people crying in that part of the game. I love it. You have to YouTube it. It's amazing. You end of Greece, and I don't know, I love it, because they cry of happiness. It's a depression, but they cry of happiness, of knowing how to overcome that. And I don't know exactly how he made it, but he knew. When I told him how what he had to do, he knew exactly what to do. Obviously, he has experience. He has been working as a musician for years. He had a few albums with Berlinist, and I know they did some research as well with movies and games, like the Games Head show. So I don't know exactly how he made it, but I know he did. And talking about the playtest, well, the first thing that it helped us a lot is having this broad team, because we wanted to have a game that we could play pretty much everywhere. So a lot of people that never play video games, literally never. So they were the first ones that we wanted to try the puzzles. Obviously, after probably a few months that they have been trying, they are not good enough for testing anymore, because now they have played with games. So what we were doing is bringing it to friends, bringing it to people around us. And I would say the last year, pretty much, we have an external team as well, helping us in Poland with the testing. And basically, they test the game, but the first 1 week, 2 weeks, they give you just the impression as a playtest. They don't actually test functionality. They just give you the things that they feel, where they find it hard. So that was another way of having a bit of knowledge about the puzzles. But obviously, we don't have enough resources to be like for 3 months or for a month focusing on the playtest and iterate enough. But I think it was more or less enough with what we had.
Hi, I'm Carlos from the University of Goldsmiths, University of London. This talk was very inspiring. Thank you much. But actually, I would like to ask a bit more about the technical side of it.
Go for it.
I see that you are very technical person, right? So, well, did you write the game in your own tools? Did you use any commercial tools? And what were the challenges you faced from a technical perspective?
Well, first of all, we use Unity as the engine. In general, I will always recommend to use an engine, unless you have a really good reason not to make it. Because Unity and Unreal, they let you customize quite a lot, so you can do a lot of tools and work with it pretty well. And in our case, we went with Unity because we know it better, especially Roger and me, as we are the only programmers that were in the team. And we thought also it was better for that 2D game compared with Unreal. But basically, what we did is try to customize it as much as possible. We end up having the artists used in Unity as well. And that's obviously kind of a challenge. So what we did is creating a lot of tools in Unity so they were more comfortable. And especially because, to be honest, they could mess up the scenes. So we did a lot of tools to check that everything was correct. Like, for example, when you work with a 2D game, it doesn't matter the depth position anymore. You have to take in account the sorting draw, like you drawing with a sorting layer or whatever. So we had a lot of tools that to tell us if two things were in the same sorting layer in the same place, things like that. Or so you could see how everything was spread, or if something was too far, or if something was invisible. But we have a lot of tools just to check that everything was correct. And also we have a lot of tools to import from Photoshop to Unity. That was also another key part, because they used to work in Photoshop. So these tools were very, very important to iterate. Every time they have to change something, you can just drag a file to our exporter, it will re-export everything, get it in Unity, and it was in place, no problem. So that was very important. And from the technical point of view, the first few months, Roger and we worked a lot in the shaders to make it look like if it was a real picture. So we work a lot with the watercolor shaders, with the paper shaders that we have. But basically that was the first few months. So once we had that idea clear, after that basically we told the artists what we could do and what we couldn't, and they pretty much get it quite quickly, and it was pretty much, unless you have something more important that you want to know, I don't know, animation, sound, but the rest, really.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Cristina Silva from the University of Minho. I found it absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Regarding the tools, can you tell us which tool did you use for animation?
Yeah, well, for this project we used mostly Photoshop right away. Yeah, we did pretty much everything with Photoshop. But then in Unity, we didn't use Mechanic that much. Is the animation engine they have. We use it, but basically all the transitions we code it ourselves, because for a 2D game animation, it's not that important, the mechanic, because it will help you with transitions, it will help you with blending, but that's for bonus. So if you're doing a frame-by-frame animation, you don't need to blend between positions. But you need to control a lot where to transition from which frame to which frame. That's very important. So that's what we recode everything. But for the tools, we basically use Photoshop and scripts that we created.
Okay, and how long did it took to develop the game?
So if you don't count the first year was basically making the prototype, which we also used to define the game and to create some of the tools. But probably from that year, like 4 or 5 months was looking for a publisher, checking the contract, signing the deal. And after that, when we start production, it was 22 months from January 2017, 17, to pretty much, it was November of 2019. So pretty much 22 months of the full development, plus this year of pre-production and paperwork.
Hello, Penny Sweetser from the Australian National University. Thank you for your presentation and congratulations on a beautiful game. You mentioned that most of your team were not previously game developers. I was just wondering, where did they come from? How did you find them? And did it result in a more diverse team?
Well, definitely. I mean, it was extremely diverse. As you can see, most of the people were artists that came from just advertising or maybe animation shows or whatever, or just a lot of freshmen like from the university, the fresh graduates. And I think it was more or less easy for us, especially looking for artists, because we had Conrad, and a lot of people in Barcelona knew Conrad. So as soon as you say, okay, do you want to work with Conrad Rousset? You have a lot of people that want to work literally for free. So we pay them all, don't worry. Even to the interns we pay. But it's true, there were a lot of people that they didn't care if they weren't getting money at all, especially artists. And then, luckily for us, and luckily for the rest of Spain, in Spain there wasn't many project ideas. So it was really special to tell someone, you want to work in this kind of game, because basically Barcelona is growing a lot, and it's getting much better, especially now. But most of the games are mobile games, or like King, Social Point, etc. But having a 2D platformer, very artistic with this music, is really hard to find. So for us, if you find people that were looking for that, it was much easier. They were looking for even moving from, we have a girl coming from Granada that came here. So the level designer, the architect came from Salamanca. And they were willing just to move here. We didn't pay much because we didn't have that money, but it was enough, and they decided to go for it. So more or less, it's good when you have a different project. Yeah.
So, Jan van Lang, Aalto University. Usually, when people look at an artwork, you usually have like the emotional challenge. You have to deal with the emotions presented in the art. And in a video game, then you also have the functional challenge of people having, how did you find that these two aspects kind of interact?
You mean like the functionality and the design and the art?
How a gameplay challenge, for example, if that hindered or if that enhanced the emotions that people were supposed to feel?
Well, especially for our game, it's very important. We were trying to avoid frustration. That was the most important thing that we were trying to avoid. And why? Because we wanted people that never play video games to play this game. So it's really, really easy to have them frustrated, because just a simple jump, they might not make it. So we try to have this really smooth curve of difficulty, and that was one of the most important things, trying to make the game more or less easy at the beginning, trying to explain the basic mechanics of an adventure game, of a 2D platformer. So at the first 5 minutes of the game is like a tutorial for noobs, basically. So they learn that, this is how this kind of game works. And we use also these 5 minutes to tell a bit the structure of how the whole world is going to work. In a very, very short level, we explain that you are going to be navigating through a world, and you will come back to places, and then you will be unlocking things in a very simple way. So we work a lot on that. And that's the thing. I mean, when you are trying to make a video game for everybody, there's emotions that you cannot control that the player is going to experience. But for example, you can control some things like the type of puzzles. If you create a puzzle that is more of walking around and investigating, it's probably more, chill, it's relaxed. You don't get frustrated that much, unless you get lost. If you get lost, then this frustration is like where I am. But you can control, for example, that we did that in the 5th level. we control that the people think they're getting lost, but they are not. Because we are blocking their way. They don't know it, but we are blocking the way. They cannot come back. And they're like, where I am, and then you suddenly are ready to stupid. But we wanted that. So we play a bit with that idea of controlling what the player can make, and so we can make them feel lost or chill or anxious. For example, another scene is the eel. The eel is pursuing you, and we want you to have the feeling that, well, this eel is gonna eat me, but you cannot fail. But it looks like you can, because if you don't do it, and in a way, there's more or less a penalty if you don't do it right. That is like a trophy. So if you do it wrong, you won't get a trophy. But that's pretty much it. But we want this tension of, oh, I'm gonna die, but you cannot die. So we have to fight with this kind of design, challenging, at the same time trying to not to frustrate people. I don't know if this answers your question, but perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
So Dan Woodwardson from Queensland University of Technology. I have one really selfish question and one answer. The selfish question, like a lot of people, are about to go on a very long flight, and given I'm prepared to cry in front of people on that flight, would you recommend the PC version or the Switch version?
Okay. Okay, I have to say, I like a lot the screen on the Switch. The colors, it looks amazing. Really, it looks much better than most of the screens that everybody has in their own house. So on that regard, Switch is perfect. But it is true that performance on the Switch is not amazing. And our game is all stream. There's no loading times. It's all in one chunk. And doing that in a console like Switch has been a really big challenge. But I think it worked more or less okay. You will pretty much notice it. But obviously, if you have a big screen with a lot of resolution and a sound system, then I would say play it at home. But if you are playing at home in a console or in a small TV, probably you can play it in Switch. It looks really good on Switch. So it's up to you. And don't be shy. Cry and play it. That's fine.
The second question that I'm not sure you'll be able to answer is, can you talk at all about what you're working on now?
No. No, we are creating a new prototype now. We will be showing to publishers soon, but we haven't announced anything yet. What I can say obviously is the art, the story, in general, the music is going to be very important. And we will go for something kind of similar, but in a different way of Greece.
Thanks so much for this story.
Thank you. That's it?
Hi, so.
Yeah, it works.
Hi, so Tristan Hayden from the University of York. So I've done some work on accessibility, and your game is very beautiful, but it seems to focus on beauty in the visual and auditory sense. Did your game think of people with players with disabilities as far as players who are blind, players who cannot hear while you're developing your game?
Yeah, that's something that we talk, but to be honest, when you're in a small team, it's a fair project, you cannot do everything as you would like to, especially because something that we talked was about the colorblind people. That's something that we have talked about, and actually our level designer is colorblind. And he has played the game with no problem, so that's kind of our test on colorblind, that guy, that he designed the level, so the music. But anyway, we didn't have time, and we didn't have the resources to do this, because sometimes when you do that, you have to iterate more on the levels and on the design, because basically there's another input on the feedback. And that's something that we would like to do more in our next games. We would like to take more of this in account. Obviously, when you go for bigger disabilities, it's much harder. If you go for someone that is, I don't know, completely deaf or blind, that's much harder. Eventually, I would like to do something, even if it's small games, for this, because I think it's nice, and I think it's also a very creative process when you focus on this. For example, I remember being in Ubisoft, we were doing prototypes sometimes, just for fun. There was this sound designer that was creating a game that it was just with sound. So basically, well, there was something on the screen, but it was pointless. It was basically, you have to play just with the sound. And I think that's a very interesting idea. That's something he brought with new ideas for a game. So I think it's not something that people should explore a bit more. But as I said, for small teams, it's really hard to. Basically, when you do your first game, you want everybody to play. And that's pretty much it. You don't have much time to do it.
Okay, so let's close the Please address them.
Before we say goodbye, we would like to invite Max up to the stage. Talk about student game design presentation. We'll be back later.
Okay, this works. Good evening, everyone. We are coming to a close here almost. I'm Hannah Berman, Balthazar Fernandez, and Dory Sanchez Navarro. Announce actually the award winners of the Student Game Design Competition, one of my favorite events. And I learned a lot, like in the last hour, about narrative, art, and animation, design, and music. And I would like to kind of actually bring this into my presentation here, right? So you are right in the narrative already. You see my beautiful artwork. There's going to be more of it. Animation-wise, yeah, we're good. Okay, animation, we're good. But to create a wonderful experience, I actually need all your help here. Okay, so bear with me. For design and music, I will need you. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a flip drum roll. You're all familiar with that? Everybody, we have a test. That's our route. Fantastic. Okay, so that's the musical part, but here comes the design of the musical experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the drum roll. And then when I announce the award winners, we all get up and like return to the clapping. Can we try this? Drum roll, drum roll. Award winners get up. Everyone has to get up. Clap. Absolutely amazing. Fantastic. Thank you. So we're creating a fantastic experience here for our award winners. I actually need to get the awards, so I'm going to walk over here. Bear with me for a second, because they are in an envelope as these things were in here. So we're ready to go. All right. We start with the honorable mention. Keep on going. Let me present you to. This is my tension slide. Here it is. That's great, perfect. Congratulations. Congratulations very much. Then your photo skills are needed, like the whole thing. Let's do it. Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah. Look at this. He loves Twitter. It's really great. You should follow it. It does it really well. Okay, but fantastic. Thank you very much. Congratulations. All right, we come to the first prize winner. We start again with drum roll. The first prize, the Student Game Design Competition, will be presented to insert zeros. Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's take a minute.
I don't have slides. Hi, I'm Peggy Magic, and I'm just here to talk to you about something so more boring than this, which is how you can volunteer for kite play and sig kite. And so I'm not sure, how many of you are first timers at KaiPlay again? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Okay, so KaiPlay is one of a number of conferences that's sponsored by an organization called SIGCHI, which is a special interest group on computer-human interaction. And it's part of the Association for Computing Machinery, or the ACM. And so within SIGCHI, we have a lot of conferences. We have Kai, which is our flagship conference. And then we have, I don't know, 20-something, don't quote me on that, specialized conferences that focus on a number of different topics, from recommender systems, through to auto AI, through to, of course, interaction and play. And so we're actually one of the newest conferences. We just started in 2014. And it was started by a group of people that are in this room. And there's lots of good reasons why you can volunteer. Volunteering isn't just doing stuff and not getting money for it. You can actually really start to kind of bring your vision into what you want to see this conference become and how you can influence it. Another good reason to volunteer for KaiPlay in particular, or SIGCHI in general, is that it helps you build a really great network of people that you can work with throughout the years. So some of the people, so I started volunteering as a student volunteer back in 2000 something that I'm not going to admit to. I already admitted to being middle-aged in Carson's talk earlier, so that's obvious. But, so I started volunteering as a student volunteer, and some of the people that I had met student volunteering, doing that nice job where you get to, you know, answer to all the quick responses that are needed and run around with the mic when people need to ask questions. Those people are the people that I'm now still networking with and communicating with and actually running conferences with, conferences like Kai and KaiPlay. So these people will be with you throughout your academic career, and meeting them as a volunteer is a great way to get to know them. Doing work together is actually one of the best ways to get to know the people. It's not just talking about stuff, but actually working together on stuff is a great way to connect. So it actually is really beneficial for your career moving forward. And there's lots of different ways you can volunteer. It's not all just like in terms of like high-level organizational positions. There's volunteering in terms of students. Without the student volunteers, we wouldn't be able to run these conferences because we would have to pay a lot of professional staff to do things. And so we have student volunteers that make everything run smoothly. Without them, this conference just wouldn't run, or any of the conferences just wouldn't run. You can volunteer in terms of reviewing. All of these papers that you saw, I don't know if Acceptory was this year, maybe 28? 28. So there's a lot of papers that we didn't see here that also had to have reviews. And so there's a lot of reviewing that's necessary for this conference. And it's not just for the papers track. We need reviewers for a lot of the other tracks as well. So if you think, well, I've never really published a full paper, I've only published posters before, that's great. But, you know, we do volunteers review for the posters track, for example. So we need volunteers for reviewers, we need volunteers to organize as well. And I think that, like I said, it's a great way to meet other people. And I think that the last thing that I want to mention and come back to is the ability to influence the direction of the conference. So the group of us that started KaiPlay were kind of a little bit frustrated by the lack of places that we could publish high-quality research in the area of interactive play. And so we volunteered to make a conference so that we could have that happen. And then there were a few people that were frustrated by the lack of certain types of research being represented within this conference. And so that they volunteered to be part of the curation of the program to try and welcome all different types of research that they felt was missing from this venue. And so if you have an idea, if you think, well, the poster session would be much better if it, you know, did this thing, or I could imagine, you know, the interactivity because it would really benefit from this thing, then bring your ideas forward. Maybe you could run that track yourself, or maybe you could just contribute as a volunteer to try and help kind of curate the program, or you could actually bring the ideas to the people who are in charge. So we don't really have a good mechanism actually for collecting volunteers. So I'm going to say that we should, if you feel like you want to contribute, if you feel like you want to influence the direction of the conference, that you talk to next year's chairs, and I'm not going to pass it over to them yet, but you're going to see them in the next 20 minutes. And so I think that's the best way to try and volunteer for the upcoming KaiPlay and moving forward from there. Okay, so that's my 5 minutes on volunteering for SIGCHI and KaiPlay. And now I'm going to pass it to the chair of the steering committee of KaiPlay, which is a volunteer position, Daniel Johnson.
I have a very nice duty at this point, which is to put together a vote of thanks to this year's general chairs. And one of the things that's happened in the past is we've had last minute rush to find a nice gift to show our appreciation. So I've very cleverly thought I'd order something very nice for them.
and it hasn't arrived. So, while we think about what a lovely conference it's been, the fantastic venue, the lovely welcome reception, the excellent dinner, the great panels, the amazing keynote speakers, and also I will say it's always a big job to run a conference, but there are a couple of things that happened in the lead up to this conference that made it even more work. So it's a particularly impressive effort that our general chairs have made this year. Please join me in thanking Johan and Leonard. Maybe we can do them the kindness of a standing ovation, as is obviously our well-worn fantastic. I'll now hand over to them. Say, busy. All right, let's.
You start?
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
it's almost there, but I have to say that I'm very pleased that everyone was here, and I want to thank all the presenters, the keynotes, and as they said, all the volunteers. Because, well, now we are standing here, but it has been a team before. And also the student volunteers, maybe they could stand up.
Yeah, for all the student volunteers that are here to stand up. Amazing job. Amazing job. I'm going to be here. Melissa, and all the crew. That was amazing. So much work. You are all awesome. Keep working it. I think it was great. Other than the student volunteers, we would also like to ask everyone, and you might not want to stand up, I know Kai always does the standing up thing, so you might want to remain anonymous, but everyone that has volunteered to do reviews for KaiPlay, everyone that has volunteered to be on the program committee for KaiPlay, everyone that was an SC for KaiPlay, everyone that was an organizer for KaiPlay, if all of you could please stand up if you feel like it right now, or you can do that thing with your hand, or you're quiet.
Thank you. Thank you.
So many unpaid hours.
Yeah. Thanks for working for me.
We love you. That's the only thing we can do. This being said, it was a great pleasure organizing KaiPlay in Barcelona. Specifically, Johan has done a lot of amazing work on the ground. I just kind of, from afar, from Canada, Skyped in on the Mondays and said,
"What are you doing?
I need to come on."
Yeah, exactly. First requirement.
Yeah.
Everything else optional.
Everything else optional. But it was a great conference, and thank you very much. And everything that remains for us to do now is to hand it over to another person that we value very much, and that I've actually had the pleasure of doing the very first KaiPlay together with back then still as a local volunteer. But now, finally, the chair of the next KaiPlay. I'm going to pass it on to Pejman Mirza Babai.
Okay, so the testing a slide because I have lots of things to show you. Let's see if I can have the audio Cool. So, hello everyone. So as the current chair said, my name is Pejman. I'm from Ontario Tech University, and I will be one of your KaiPlay 2020 general chairs.
And I'm also the vice president for membership for SIGCHI, and Regan is also already talked about SIGCHI a bit, but for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, SIGCHI is the ACM, a special interest group for human-computer interaction. We run and sponsor 24 conferences, including CHI, that you guys have heard, and CHI we just attended. So I would say from someone who attended this conference, and also on behalf of SIGCHI, I want to thank everyone and congratulate the organizing committee for the amazing conference they put together. I especially want to thank the local chairs and practice this. So muchas gracias for this amazing conference. I have a small surprise for you guys, and that's a message from SIGCHI's Vice President of Conferences, which I'm gonna play now.
Hello, I'm Aaron SIGCHI Vice President for Conferences, and I wanted to send you my best wishes on your conference this week in Barcelona. I enjoy watching the tweets, and I can see lots of excitement. Congratulations to the organizers for putting together what looks like a great program, having a sold-out conference, and dealing with the challenges that are ever present about bringing a conference like this and hosting it, and also the opportunity that you have here in Barcelona to have an amazing time. And I just want to point out that this is one of our newer SIGCHI sponsored conferences, but in many ways it's exemplary in what it's been doing. And you should know that the work that's gone on into kind of creating the terms of reference for the CHI Play conference has actually informed the CHI steering committee formation. So the reach of what you've done as a community goes beyond just CHI Play. It's actually gone out to help CHI. And also some of the innovations that you actually have within your conferences have given ideas and inspiration to other conferences and other community series across the family of 24 conferences that we have. So while you are at CHI Play, you might think it's just us. Please understand that we're watching, we can see what's going on, others are inspired by the ideas that you have, things are happening around the world, and I think the CHI Play should be honored and should recognize the reach that they've actually had as a community. And we thank you, and we look forward to future conferences, and we hope you have a fun time this week and learn lots from each other. So.
So I also, since we have many first-time kind of CHI Play attendees, I thought I'm gonna give you a bit of a history about CHI Play. So as Leonard mentioned, the first CHI Play was 2014, so he's basically born in Canada. Then we moved to London in 2015. I don't know if Anna is here. I think we started earlier. She left. From London, we went to Austin. I did. And from Austin to Amsterdam, I flew. From there to Melbourne, to Dan, back in Barcelona. So it's been 6 years, and I guess we can all agree that it's time to go home for CHI Play. So as many of you have heard, probably CHI Play gonna be in Canada next year, so I'm gonna wear my Canadian hat. And then I have a bit of a video to show you, so basically we can learn more about CHI Play 2020's location.
It's a place to get away, to get together, to feel a part of something big. It's a city of fire and ice, fields and streams, waterways, boulevards, courtyards, and landmarks. It's a destination where you can experience highs, lows, sounds, and sights, both day and night. It's a place where we speak in English, and in French, and in many other languages. A place where you can feast, feed your imagination, take a chance with Lady Luck, and take time for yourself. It's a place to get dressed up, to get wrecked, to get on a bike, and to get back in the swing. It's a city where you can walk, run, ride, row, and rock and roll. It's a place where you can stand, shout, and cheer. It's where you'll share laughter, shed a tear, stare in wonder, and show your pride. It's a place where we reflect on the past, reach for the future, and live for the moment. It's Ottawa, Canada's capital, and it's for you, and me, and you. See you soon.
So, yeah, CarPlay 2020, we have the date November 1st to November 4th, Ottawa, Canada. So I'll be chairing the conference with Vicky from Carleton University. We have the technical program chair, so Vero and Max. And we also have our paper chairs, Katrina and Gunther. So this is the team that we have. Sorry? There's the opportunity to ask them all the questions you want to ask them. And I also have some other, if you are not convinced yet to come to next year's CarPlay, I'm going to have some other highlights, I would say, to convince you to come. So the conference is taking place in the heart of Ottawa, so we're going to be located basically between the river and the Parliament. It's going to be co-hosted or co-located with VRSD conference. For the, I think, first time in CarPlay, we're going to have a dedicated sponsor exhibition, demo, game design competition, poster space. So it's going to be an exhibition space. So for those who are from industry or have a company who want to have a booth at CarPlay, that's going to be possible. Together with VRSD, we are expecting more than 400 people, so it's going to be a big conference. And we are currently working with IGDA, so International Game Development Association, to bring more industry participants to CarPlay. And I think this is kind of brand new, that CKI announced conference support for participants from economically developing countries. So they're going to be to be confirmed, financial support for people who are coming to CarPlay or other CKI conferences from those countries. I also thank our TPC, or the next year's TPC, and the paper chairs for working in the last few days to figure out some of the key deadlines for you, so you know how to plan or when to plan and put these deadlines in your calendar. So the paper deadline is April 7th. This is just before Easter, so you submit your paper, go have fun. It's the holiday, then the rebuttal period is going to be June 15 to 12. So if you want to book holidays and stuff, make sure you're probably going to need to be at your university those days. And the camera ready deadline is going to be August 7, 2020. And as Regan mentioned earlier, our intention to be trying to grow the volunteer involvement, to be more inclusive. So there are going to be open calls going on to help us recruit the chairs that hasn't been filled yet, as well as ACs, as well as student volunteers. So those calls are going to be posted both on CarPlay, Twitter, and CKI's Twitter account. So if you are not following those accounts and you're interested in volunteering, make sure to follow those. And we appreciate your support in helping you.
That's it, folks. It's over.
Did you make a top? Top? I've never heard of it yet. I thought we were friends. I'm the voice of